The story opens with the scene of a brutal battle that has just taken place, with countless corpses strewn across the ground. Standing there, a blond man turns back to speak to the young man behind him. Ash, is that you? This man is none other than Roderick. He continues, I entrusted you with the Eastern Conquest campaign. So why are you here now? Looking completely pathetic, the young man replies coldly, I'm here to kill you. His words cause Roderick's eyes to narrow slightly, flashing with a hint of anger. From the very beginning, you intended to use my unit as bait, only to discard us after you were done with us. The young man's gaze flashes with determination. Am I saying anything wrong, father? He replies in a cold tone, isn't that the only value of a wingless person like you? Am I right, my foolish son Ash Elmheim? The Elmheim family is the most powerful military clan on the continent, having offered their swords to protect the royal family for generations. The head of the family, Ash Elmheim, is the only person in the kingdom who possesses 7 wings. Just on a whim, he saved me when I was on the brink of death in a blizzard. Because of that, I did everything I could just to repay that debt of life. However, memories of his childhood surface. At that time, he was constantly bullied by his brothers. They mocked him. A wingless loser without even a crest shouldn't be dreaming so high. He tells himself, I have no wings to repay father. The more wings one possesses, the greater the magnetic force from the surface. Being the only one in the ducal residence unable to use magic, I was called the wingless one. Even so, I only knew how to desperately cling to my sword. I trained frantically without rest, striving more each day and believing that one day this loyalty would be rewarded. Back to the present. Just a short while ago, he and his entire group were ambushed. After an incredibly fierce battle, he is the only one who returned, looking absolutely wretched. He says to his father, I have followed you, trusted you until now. And this is your answer? He maintains his attitude, a mediocre tool. With so many others, what right do you have to demand expectations? You are an eyesore. Get out, now. Hearing this, all affection within him runs dry. He immediately grips his sword tightly and lunges straight at Roderick. He blames himself, I was such a fool to have believed in someone like that. His first strike lands, Roderick doesn't dodge, simply smiling as he receives it, considering it a repayment of kindness. Immediately after, 2 henchmen approach from behind, locking him down with magical chains. Because he cannot use magic, he can only watch helplessly as they rush to attack. Parts of his body begin to fall off. Intense pain surges through him, causing his entire body to go numb. He coughs up a mouthful of blood in total helplessness. The blond man turns back to sneer, still don't understand, dear little brother? After all, a wingless being is just a worm crawling on the ground like that. He grits his teeth in anger and curses, if you were just going to discard me in the end, then why did you save me in the beginning? He approaches the young man and utters harsh words, don't flatter yourself. I never needed someone like you to begin with. What I needed was the power of the 7 wings that existed within your body. This leaves him somewhat surprised. 7 wings? He continues, your mother was truly useful. She gave birth to a seed like you just to serve me. With that, he turns and walks away. He reaches out and screams in desperation, wait. What are you talking about? Answer me, Roderick. Before he can get an answer, his 2 brothers rush in from behind with looks of pure amusement. After a period of unconsciousness due to massive blood loss, he feels freezing pain radiating from within his body. So cold. Am I going to die here? After all I've been through, what have I actually been living for all these days? Everything is white. And vaguely warm. So this is the afterlife? By some miracle, he is now in the body of a child. Unable to handle the cold, he sneezes. He realizes something, no, this isn't reality, so where am I? And is this small body really me? Like the body of a newborn. Am I completely a newborn baby? Then he glances at the person beside him holding him tight. This woman, is she dead? In that blizzard, a group of people are frantically searching for something. Find that woman at all costs. She can't have gone far in this blizzard. For Lord Roderick, we must retrieve the infant she took. All of their words from the distance suddenly echo in his head, making him startle. What was that? And did they just say Lord Roderick? Is he hunting down a baby? Could that person be me? I remember being picked up on a snowy night like this one. Could it be that I have returned to the past? What kind of absurd thing is happening? The sound of rapid hoofbeats continues to echo all around. He reassures himself, I'll confirm later. If I stay here, I will surely fall into the hands of the ducal family. His arms try to reach forward to move, His whole body radiates a golden mana full of determination. I must get out of here. As far as possible, as fast as possible. But right now he is just a newborn and cannot move far. Damn it. My breathing is so labored. My limbs feel scorching hot as if they're burning. Even if I have to crawl, I must survive. I must live, and I will definitely make Lord Roderick pay. He continues to crawl unconsciously. After struggling for a while, he falls asleep from exhaustion in the middle of the white snow. A moment later, a pair of small feet approaches him. The white-haired girl turns back to say, "Father." This white-haired man is Viscount Heitfried. He looks at him and exclaims, "Oh my, why is there a child in a place like this?" Holding the baby in his arms, a thought flashes through his mind. A baby that has traveled such a long way. Who on earth is this child? A vague scene, a muddled tone suddenly appears. Where is this? Memories of Alphen as a child suddenly become clear. This child came to see me. Just then, Aster startles awake. The aftermath of the dream lingers, making him blurt out. Angel Alphen peers in and excitedly exclaims, "Sister." He opened his eyes. Flair frowns and warns, "Hey, don't poke him. You'll pull his cute little nose right off." Immediately after, Aster suddenly struggles violently, causing the children around to panic. What the hell is going on? Aster doesn't stop there but rubs his cheek against friend's sleeve, causing her to shriek, "No, stop that." Aster struggles hard and leaps out of everyone's arms. He crawls forward with all his might as if trying to grab something ahead. Flair sees this and is extremely panicked. Damn it, what is happening here? She picks up Alphen and chases after him. Standing there, seeing the chaotic scene behind him, Aster is confused as to why they are chasing him. Soon he grits his teeth as if channeling all his magic, pushing himself forward. His pupils glow strangely. Immediately after, Aster's small body is suddenly lifted by a mysterious energy. I'm flying. This is magic. And so Aster tries to flip his body to turn the situation around. Yet that mysterious power disappears, causing his body to plummet uncontrollably. I can't control my fall. By reflex, Aster closes his eyes in fear, unable to face it. Just then, a man appears and catches him. Now you're falling from the sky too? What a strange child. Aster hears this, widens his eyes, and looks back, realizing this man is Heifried, the older brother of Duke Roderick. Upon realizing, Aster's heart whispers, "No way, don't tell me this is another branch of the Elmheim family." A remaining part of his memory flickers. Heifried, the head of the Viscount house, a sub-branch of the Elmheim family, once stood side by side with his younger brother Roderick. He was one of the two trusted pillars responsible for protecting the royal family, but the Viscount he knew died in the Civil War, along with the extinction of his entire family. Now I'm sure of it. After piecing everything together, Aster is stunned to realize he has truly returned to the past. Aster sighs helplessly, "I tried to run away from the ducal family, and now I've been picked up by his brother." Later, Aster lies snugly in the arms of a woman. She looks at him with worried eyes. Did the child's magic go wild and make him fly? It seems so. I knew he wasn't a normal baby. Then the corners of her lips lift, smiling kindly. The woman hugs Aster tightly and comforts him. "You must be scared, you're safe now." Hearing that, he just stares with wide eyes, not understanding a thing. Heifried, standing beside them, also involuntarily looks and smiles. He gently reaches out to touch Aster and whispers, "This child possesses an unimaginable power." Heifried lifts his shirt to reveal the pattern on his back and declares, "This mark is the proof." The woman sees the mark and frowns in astonishment. This is the 7 wings. Aster himself is stunned when he sees the mark. Why did this thing appear on my body? No sooner are the words spoken than his pupils dilate as if remembering something. He remembers Roderick's words from his previous life. What we need is the power of the 7 wings within you. After realizing this, he is briefly shocked. So that's it. Aster just happens to remember the scene that occurred on that snowy night. Roderick lifted Aster up and brought him back to achieve his goal. Thinking back on everything, he clenches his fists in extreme anger. He saved me just to steal the 7 wings. Wingless, what are you talking about? You tore the wings off another person yourself. And yet you dare to open your mouth and say that. The woman suddenly hugs him tightly, looking worried. She looks at Heifried's expression and asks cautiously, "What should we do with this child?" A premonition suddenly surges in his mind. This isn't good. His small hands clench tight. I can't let this power fall into the hands of the Elmheim family. I need this power to take revenge on him. Heifried thinks for a moment and decides, I will adopt this child. This statement makes the tension in Aster vanish, replaced by a look of amazement. Heffrey gently reaches his hands toward Aster. He lightly strokes his head and concludes, "This child is currently just a little bird that cannot fly on its own yet. Until the day it chooses to take flight by its own will, I will be responsible for raising it." Hearing this, Aster widens his eyes in surprise, as if unable to believe it. Just then, Martha and Flair tumble to the ground. Seeing the children gradually appear, Heffried asks seriously, "You heard it?" Martha sits up and whispers softly, "We were just worried about the child." Heffried sighs. Flair excitedly runs to the woman's side. "Mom!" She looks at Aster with an eager face. "What is this baby's name?" She smiles and ponders. "Let's see." Later, she lifts him up and names him Aster, the name of a new star just born into our family. Time passes quickly until 10 years later. As soon as they set foot at the academy, a man asks respectfully, "We have been waiting for you, Viscount Heffried." At that moment, the mysterious figure of Aster appears from the carriage. Stepping off the carriage, he walks with a very confident demeanor. Aster carefully and delicately supports Alphen. "Be careful stepping down, Sister Alphen." She smiles and replies, "Thank you, Aster." Aster smiles as he watches Alphen's playful appearance. Then he holds his sword and follows behind Alphen. The Sword Dance Gala, an annual social event held by a prestigious ducal family under the Elmheim banner for the martial nobility. On the surface, it is a place for families to strengthen relationships, but it is also a stage for each family to show off their promising young swordsman. Soon, both walk up behind Heffried, those who carry the glory of the lineage. And so Heffried leads, with Aster and Alphen following majestically. Around them are whispered comments from students at the school. "Look, the Viscount family is here. Are they here to make a fool of themselves again? I heard they couldn't have an heir, so they adopted some unknown brat from who knows where. How long do they intend to drag the Elmheim name through the mud?" Aster walks by calmly, surprising everyone. "So that's the one?" Alphen sees him paying attention and tries to remind him, "Don't pay it any mind." She clenches her hand and warns, "In this place, just showing a little weakness will get you crushed immediately." Aster walks with an expressionless face beside Alphen's hand, which is trembling with anger. Heffried also speaks in a low voice, "This is the current status of our Viscount family." Hesitating for a moment, he turns to look at him with a look of trust. "I want you to see it with your own eyes." He looks at Aster's ice-cold expression and asks, "Are you disappointed?" The corner of his lips curves into a smile, a hard attitude. "Not at all, father, this coldness actually suits me very well." Seeing that attitude, Heffried laughs proudly. "Then that's good. In my previous life, as the disgrace of the Elmheim family, I had the worst possible debut in high society, a place filled with bitter memories." Aster grips the sword in his hand with a determined thought, "But now that the 7 wings have returned, I am different." Aster's eyes furrow, sharp as knives, staring straight at the target. At that moment, Heffried, Alphen, and Aster suddenly look up at a classroom window. Through the glass, Darius and Gryan appear with unpleasant expressions. Aster stares straight ahead in silence, his hand instinctively clenching tight. He follows Heffried and smugly concludes, "Then let's start a brilliant debut for high society." The swordsmanship competition, the central event of the entire city, breaks out, also as proof of an era when knights ruled the world. On the arena, the swordsman grips his sword with a determined look. His opponent is not a useless person either, gritting his teeth and rushing forward, clearly a knight who must possess both strength and charisma. The two of them charge directly at each other amidst the cheers of the audience. Strength is swordsmanship. Quickly, the stronger swordsman knocks his opponent back. Charisma is reputation. He coldly rushes forward, the two of them continuing to use momentum to lunge at each other. And there is one thing that proves a person possesses both. A mark gradually appears on the swordsman's hand, his eyes also glowing brightly. The swordsman flatly swings his sword, shattering his opponent's blade, leaving him in tatters. Finally, he raises his sword high in admiration of everyone. The ultimate symbol of everything is the wing mark. The winner is also the one with the wing mark clearly displayed on their body. Alphen in the stands covers her ears tightly, looking uncomfortable. This place is still stifling to the point of madness. She quietly remembers the expressions of Fren and Flair earlier in size. It's no wonder that Sister Fren and Sister Flair didn't want to come. Meanwhile, Aster just broods and hangs his head. He suddenly remembers his own miserable scene when he lost to Darius. Alphen looks at Aster and calls out, "Aster." She asks worriedly, "Are you nervous? After all, this is your first sword dance festival." Contrary to his state earlier, he replies confidently this time, "Actually, no." Internally thinking, if anything, it's just a sense of familiarity. Alphen looks at Aster, unable to understand. Heffried steps in at that moment to instruct, "I'm going out for a bit for the banquet, please keep an eye on Elfen. She hears this and is a bit displeased. Father, I am much more capable than Aster. He can only smile and respond, you are clumsy, sister. He hears this and places his hand on Aster's shoulder with an expectant look. There are many children your age here. Try to build relationships when you can. Afterward, he changes his expression and whispers, and don't let anyone discover the 7 wings. He watches Hefried's back with some hesitation. Father says that, but he realizes that the murderous gaze of everyone is fixed on him. Aster sighs wearily. In an atmosphere of open hostility like this, what kind of connection can you make? Suddenly he notices something. Elfen sees Aster rushing off and is surprised. Aster, where are you going? He doesn't look back but only replies, to make friends. Aster goes straight to where Darius and his friends are. Darius looks at him with contempt. Who is this brat? He speaks up with a high voice to introduce himself. Nice to meet you, cousin Darius. Aster's face reveals an increasing sense of satisfaction. I am Aster, your younger brother. Aster continues to speak without caring about his grimacing look. I saw you from outside so I came to say hello. Grian beside him laughs. Is that the adopted kid? The one the Viscount family picked up? Darius hears this and reveals a look of disgust and laughs loudly. So that's it. No wonder you have the cheek to call me brother like that. He looks at the two before him and cannot help but feel angry. Darius and Grian, the two heirs of the Elmheim family, the two who killed him in his past life. Aster silently thinks to himself, they once looked terrifyingly scary, but now, before him, they are just children wearing adult masks, along with unceasing hatred. Elfen suddenly appears, cutting through the atmosphere. She grabs Aster's hand and says strictly, let's go, let's head back. Consider it as having greeted them. Darius sees this and calls out a greeting. Elfen, you're here too? He excitedly teases. What's wrong? Not hiding behind father's back today? His words become increasingly indecent. Come here and put on a show for us to see. It's an order from the main house. You know that well, don't you? Elfen just cast a furious look at Darius and snapped, no, thank you. The main house and the branch family are not in a master-servant relationship. Being pulled away, Aster hurriedly called out, sister. Before he could finish, he felt her hands trembling. I wasn't finished talking yet. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel heartbroken. Darius then adopted an arrogant tone and shouted, do you guys even know anything? He began to gossip. Her father was a knight, but he failed to protect the king, so he had to take responsibility. His own younger brother was the one who cut off his arm. Elfen was stunned for a moment upon hearing this, but Darius didn't stop. Thank God, luckily I don't carry that bloodline of failure. She shouted angrily, take that back. But before Elfen could finish, Darius blatantly spat a mouthful of wine into her face. If you dare insult my father, I won't. He looked at her with contempt. You only managed to birth useless daughters, not even able to produce a successor for the viscountcy. Your father must be very disappointed in you, right? He then revealed a cunning look, pointing at her. This isn't a ballroom. Next time remember to wear something you won't mind getting soaked, or just throw on some rags. Elfen could only stay silent, clutching her dress in frustration. Aster stood frozen in thought. On the way here, he had been worried. He looked at each of their faces in turn. I thought perhaps when I met them again, I wouldn't feel angry anymore. Thinking this, Aster grabbed the bottle of wine from their hands, then approached Elfen and placed a hand on her shoulder. But luckily, he didn't hesitate to throw the bottle at Darius. Hey, Darius. He caught the bottle with some caution. Aster immediately swung his sword, slicing the bottle in two. You're still the same piece of trash as always. Wine splattered all over Darius, leaving him stunned. Huh? Grian, standing beside him, worriedly cried out, brother. Meanwhile, Aster gently licked the wine off his sword. It's just grape juice, after all. Then, using the same look of disgust Darius had used earlier, he said, it suits a parasitic noble like you perfectly. Rewinding 3 years, a desperate scream rang out. Stop him, Aster warned. Are you planning to kill your sisters? Stay there, he commanded in a stern voice. Wake up. Witnessing this scene, Hefried was briefly stunned. So this is the 7 wings. I never imagined it contained such dangerous power. He wondered to himself, can this kind of power truly be controlled? He himself felt very confused and doubted himself. Me, and you too. A subordinate then ran into the room to report, Viscount, there is an emergency. The people present, seeing the sudden situation, frowned in annoyance. What is it? We are in the middle of negotiations. The subordinate's voice faltered, taking a while before finally daring to report. the heads of the main and branch Elmheim families, the sons of both sides are dueling. As soon as the words were spoken, Hefried frowned. What? Roderick, however, displayed an unfathomably deep gaze. Hearing the news, he decisively stood up and left. At the same time, Alphen ran over in a hurry. Her father paused slightly. Alphen asked, "What happened?" A duke's tone rang out with excitement. "Look, he seems very satisfied. A fratricidal battle within the Elmheim family isn't a sight you see often." His gaze was accompanied by judgmental intent. Regardless of how this match ends, everyone in the room was suddenly filled with curiosity. The duke's lips curled into a smile. This sword dance gala might turn into a disaster. Down on the field, Darius held his sword up grandly, daring to provoke the ducal family. What a fool. Just a bastard raised in the streets. You don't even understand the difference in power. The people around witnessed this scene and went wild. Look, that's the four-wing crest. Truly the heir of the ducal family. The class is completely different. His face couldn't hide his smugness. Come on, show me your wing crest. He kept attacking and challenging. Or are you too embarrassed to call it out after seeing mine? Aster remained strangely calm, flaunting such a mediocre pattern. He disdainfully thought, I truly couldn't do something so embarrassing. This statement completely enraged Darius. Not letting him get any angrier, Aster proposed, if I win, you must apologize to my sisters. Deal, cousin? He readily agreed, fine, and if I win, you will be my dog. Darius's eyes were filled with self-confidence. I will order you around for the rest of your life. His attack was quickly blocked by Aster, but because the power was too great, he was pushed back, causing dust to fly everywhere. Aster's hands gripped his sword even tighter. Darius arrogantly said, "This is the power of those who possess it." Finishing his sentence, he rushed forward like a storm. Seeing this, Alphen was constantly worried. Aster, the spiky-haired count, believed Darius's swordsmanship was still immature. Looking at the current situation, no matter how poor the technique was, the overwhelming mana of the wing crest was enough to compensate for everything. To compare, if one wing mana is like a candlelight, then the mana sealed in four wings is an explosion. The more they fought, the higher Darius's spirit rose. Where did that momentum go now? He kept challenging. Didn't you say you'd make me apologize? Or was it just empty talk? He shouted, show your power. Observing from above, the blonde duke was slightly surprised. Is the match over already? Aster's sword tip flashed, and he had blocked the powerful attack. This left Darius wide-eyed in shock. What? He replied coldly, you talk too much. With that, Aster used his strength to toss his cousin into the air. His current presence radiated an incredibly dominating aura. Aster thought to himself, for the past 10 years, I've learned how to control mana at the Viscount's house, just waiting for a chance to take revenge on you all. His eyes flashed with sharpness. The next strike didn't hesitate, pointing straight at Darius's head, leaving him no time to react. Under pressure, his legs buckled onto the cold ground. Everyone around could only stare in amazement. He was actually being pushed back. Even Darius himself couldn't understand. But I have 4 wings. Aster just stayed silent, not saying a word. Darius's sword looked as if it were about to snap in two. The amount of mana being released was massive. Only now did the crowd become rowdy. Don't tell me he's actually going to win? They whispered that Darius was being completely overwhelmed, with not a single chance to counterattack. Everyone felt goosebumps. Does the Elmheim family still have a monster like that? His actions continued, and Hefried's mood became worried. This isn't good. Darius gritted his teeth and endured it. He tried to remember what had happened in the past. He stammered, hey, stop. A shout also rang out from above. No. A huge source of power radiated from Aster. Everyone had just witnessed a spectacular sight. Darius's sword actually broke in two. Finished, he sent a message. Next time you should wear rags. Aster emphasized every word. Something you won't mind getting soaked. His cousin realized he was no longer the wingless one. Alphen looked at him and smiled contentedly. Up to now, just realizing that was enough to clear his mind. Suddenly, Aster's pupils contracted. A source of oppressive power was gradually approaching. He startled. It was the true enemy appearing now. That person was Roderick. The hall was filled with non-stop chatter. It was unbelievable. The youngest son of a Viscount house had actually defeated the third son of the main house's patriarch. Amidst the buzzing, a pair of feet walked slowly. But this had truly spiraled out of control. There was no way that person would stay silent after having his honor smeared like that. It was none other than Aster with a stern face, the 8th patriarch of the Elmheim main branch. Darius chuckled slightly, his eyes following him. He only saw Aster step by step approaching Roderick. He frowned, his face looking icy. Facing the pressure, he felt no fear. Duke Roderick. Immediately after, Darius hurriedly stood up. He knelt humbly before Roderick. "Father." Darius immediately tattled, his hand pointing continuously at Aster. "It's him, the bastard who dared to oppose the main branch even though he's just a dirty half-breed. Please use your power to teach him a lesson, father." But those words made Roderick even angrier. Roderick didn't answer, coldly taking action against him. Darius stared at his own hand in panic. That cruel act by Roderick left the entire hall in silence. Even Brian became extremely shocked. Roderick pulled back his hand, his gaze cold and powerful. "Why is the loser laughing so shamelessly? You have tarnished the honor of my family, you who cannot even avenge yourself." Heffried, seeing this, panicked and shouted loudly, "No, stop, Roderick." He didn't care, raising his hand high, unworthy of holding a sword. The auditorium suddenly fell silent. Darius felt endless fear. Roderick glanced over with a cold gaze. He couldn't help but be surprised by Aster's actions. "What do you think you are doing?" He remained calm and slowly explained, "My cousin still hasn't apologized to my sister." Aster's gaze was determined, speaking directly, "Please leave the punishment for after that is done, uncle." Before those words, Roderick became even gloomier. "I heard you are just an orphan that Heffried picked up, yet you truly think you are a member of Elmheim now?" He slowly replied, his voice calm, "I am a son first, even without the same bloodline. I believe I have learned enough from my father about the self-respect of a knight and the honor of the family." Hearing the reply, he glanced upward. Immediately, Roderick exploded even more. "Then as a member of the Viscount house, you have needlessly disgraced the patriarch. The pinnacle of 12,000 knights, the king's sword, and that pride as well." Those present listened intently to his words. "Surely you understand that this is no longer something that can be considered a childish quarrel." Even he couldn't help but be stunned by Roderick's words. "You should be the one who understands that best." He stood above, watching them both intently. Roderick continued to speak. "Your father lost an arm to atone for disloyalty. The blade is just inches from your collar, Aster, so what will you offer?" He suddenly replied with all respect. He spoke with a steely, unyielding voice. "This is not a quarrel between brothers but a valid duel. I am only using my sword to respond to the insults against my family." Roderick frowned more, his sharp gaze not leaving him. Aster showed no fear, frankly retorting, "Those who cannot avenge themselves are not worthy of holding a sword." "You said that, didn't you, uncle? I have no intention of losing even a finger." Alphen above also trembled at his words. He raised an eyebrow, his eyes full of interest. "Is the kid only 10 years old? You're kidding, right?" Even so, Roderick kept his stern expression unchanged. A moment later, he finally conceded, turning slightly, "I understand." But then Roderick suddenly turned back. "Then take your stance." Aster immediately took a stance, ready to respond. The blade swept past him closely. He didn't hold back. The power from the sword sent Aster flying far away. Witnessing that scene, Alphen covered her mouth in shock. Heffried panicked, immediately shouting, "Roderick!" He was furious, immediately swinging his sword toward Roderick's back. He was calm, quickly blocking that strike. Heffried quickly landed safely on the ground. He was worried, hurriedly running toward him. "Aster, are you okay?" Aster, however, only saw a broken sword there. Heffried couldn't believe his eyes at that moment. Surprisingly, Aster was still standing firm. Even though he was covered in injuries, his gaze remained determined. Roderick glanced coldly at that stubbornness. Without saying a word, he turned and walked away. Roderick with a gloomy face, his hands clenched tight. As soon as he left, Aster lost his balance, staggering and falling. Heffried worriedly caught him. "Aster, Aster." He spoke with difficulty. "I kept my word, father, the promise and everything else." He frowned at his reckless son. "You did very well." Roderick walked slowly up the stairs. He stood there waiting, unable to help teasing him. That was quite childish. Roderick showed no fear. He calmly analyzed, "But if we let the boy talk to that extent, the patriarch of the main branch would lose all face, so wouldn't ending it there be reasonable?" Even he couldn't stop praising Aster. Facing Duke Roderick directly, he still stood firm and survived. "The kid is truly a genius." He happily rubbed his chin. That was the perfect debut into high society. The person beside him finally spoke up. "Even so, I was quite scared. I thought Elmheim would be torn in two right here." Roderick looked at both of them, his eyes red. "A turbulent era is coming," he said slowly, "a storm so violent it could tear this world into 2 or 3 pieces." The next morning, the sky was clear, with white clouds floating prominently. A man's mouth hung open, showing clear surprise. At the fact that a little Aster could defeat longtime soldiers, he was extremely surprised. His lips curled into a smile. "That's truly amazing," he exclaimed happily. "Young Master Aster." The soldiers standing behind watched, stunned. "The skill is amazing. Only 10 years old and already reached this level, it's frightening." he excitedly replied. Since the sword dance gala, his training intensity has been even more terrifying than before. That must be a great motivation. With a face full of confidence, he continued, besides, have you heard? The young master defeated the third young master of Duke Roderick's house. They were extremely satisfied because that main branch had looked down on us for so many years. This was truly gratifying. Meanwhile, from Aster's mind to his eyes, a desire for victory was clearly shown. At the sword dance gala, I showed enough strength and spirit. It was like speaking his heart, at least it was enough to silence the mocking words. The Viscount family is the disgrace of Elmheim, but the real obstacle is still the Elmheim patriarch. Honestly, I want to know where my true limits are. I want to test myself on that arena even more. But his face became determined, his brows slightly furrowed, showing clear self-confidence. At my current level, I cannot defeat Roderick. Amidst the violent whirlwinds, Aster suddenly understood. In the end, the wing crest is just a measure of the hidden mana capacity in the body. Innate talent is just treasure wasted if you can't control it. Yet I still cannot release the power of the 7 wings. He swung the weapon in his hand hard. If only I didn't have to worry about losing control. If only I could test the power of the 7 wings to the limit. A decisive sweep toward the ground, sending his opponent flying far away. Aster's eyes sank, cold and certain. The final sword fell, his voice rang out defiantly, "Who's next?" In the blink of an eye, Aster had defeated all the soldiers he was facing. From behind, a shrill female voice exclaimed, "You fought well today." Alphen tilted her head, her lips curling, her words sounding like a reproach. "You really don't know the meaning of restraint." "Aster, father is calling you." Amidst the fallen bodies, he walked quietly. "Father, yes, I'm coming right away." As he walked past her, Aster paused, his eyes showing a flash of surprise. "That outfit?" Alphen turned slightly, her face calm but her eyes full of scrutiny. Aster didn't hesitate to speak frankly. "Rarely do I see you wear that. Didn't you once say you hated wearing it because it wasn't cute?" Alphen sighed, her voice calm. "Everything needs balance, right? Looking at you, I also realized I can't stand still forever." Then she pointed her wooden sword at him as a warning, clearing her throat. Half joking, half serious, "When you return you'll have to spend more time with me." Hearing that, Aster couldn't help but laugh out loud. He raised his hands to the sky as a signal. "Go easy on me, okay?" Aster stood before the door, knocked lightly, then pushed it open and entered. "May I come in?" Hefried tilted his head, his expression cold. "I called for you, sit down." Aster sat down cautiously. Faced with the heavy atmosphere in the room, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes showing a flash of fatigue. "It's been 10 years since the day you entered our family." Suddenly, Hefried pulled out a precious treasure before Aster's astonished eyes. "Actually, I intended to wait until you grew up a little more, but..." He stared at it, his mind in complete disarray. "This is..." He furrowed his brows, his gaze stern, "the mark of the family successor." Aster Hi-Fai calmly requested, "I want you to succeed the Viscount family." At his somewhat unexpected proposal, Aster's entire body stiffened. "As you know, the status of the Viscount family is very delicate," Hefried gently explained, "but even with our flaws, we are still a branch of the Elmheim house, lords protecting this territory. There are many things we must protect." He expressed his concern. "I cannot let the position of the future family head remain vacant forever." Even so, Aster was quite worried. "Do my sisters agree with this?" Hefried softly comforted him. "Your sisters are studying at the Night Academy and will return in 3 days. I intend to talk to them then." He worried, "Are Sister Martha and Sister Kudo coming back?" Aster's face darkened. If that were the case, they wouldn't be happy about it. Especially Sister Kudo, she would surely fly into a rage. He asserted clearly, "She hates me because I was accidentally born a boy and accidentally possessed the 7-winged power." Aster flatly refused immediately. His voice carried a sharp chill. "I cannot agree to this. I can't even control my own magic. I'm still the child who once almost killed his own sister." Aster felt he didn't have the confidence to face his sister's wrath like that. Hefried didn't rush to speak but smiled faintly. After a long period of contemplation, he finally spoke. "There are times when I truly wonder if you are really just a child." He excitedly placed a luxurious wooden box on the table. "This ring was originally the reward for your performance at the Sword Dance Festival." He intently observed the box in detail. "But perhaps you would like this item more." His eyes brightened involuntarily. Aster appeared excited. Hefried lowered his voice to explain. "What's inside is the magic swordgram. A blade that consumes magic, the sword capable of controlling the power of the 7 wings." Hefried led him to a forest. "All right, this spot should be fine." Aster asked inquisitively, Father, if it's just to test the sword, wouldn't the dojo be enough? No, this is just in case of the worst-case scenario. He recalled that when he was young, he had a tendency to destroy the house a bit too often. Hefried raised the sword, his gaze stern. The magic swordgram is a legendary treasure, passed down only to the eldest son of the Elmheim family. This sword was originally entrusted to the main house, but I personally brought it here just for you. Steel flashed the moment the blade left its sheath. Aster's pupils contracted, his eyes shaken by the blinding light. The sword was strangely broken, unlike any weapon he had ever seen. Is this thing a sword? As you can see, it has no blade. A blue aura swirled around the steel, while a crimson energy surged violently. The sword changed instantly. But when you pour your magic into it, the red energy converges, stretches, and deforms with each pulse of magic. The sword will be shaped based on the magic of its own master. Magic exploded from the blade, staining the surrounding ground red. A swirling vortex of air circled the trees, sucking leaves and debris into its center. Hefried gripped the blazing red sword tightly, his gaze stern. However, if the user doesn't have enough ability, the sword will drain all their magic. This is a sword with a dark reputation. The flaming sword stopped right before Aster's eyes. He suggested, well, want to try it? Without hesitation, Aster confidently gripped the sword. Flames erupted behind his back, while the swirl of magic in his hands responded to the call. He poured his own magic into this sword. Magic burst forth, golden light tearing through the space. This feeling is, within the fiery reflection, red magic churned like a living creature. Is my magic flowing into the sword on its own? The red beam shot straight into the sky. Something had officially been released. The red beam shot straight into the sky. Something had officially been released. A young man's face turned pale. What was that light just now? A shooting star from the sky? Ah, you idiot. On the contrary, something just shot straight up into the sky. Amidst the chaos, Alphen just looked at them quietly from behind. Something? What do you mean? Without needing to look long, she guessed the source of that light. It must be Aster. He gripped the sword tightly, his golden eyes shining with excitement. This sword is truly unbelievable. Hefried's eyes flickered. What's unbelievable here is your power. The sky swirled into a giant vortex. Wind and clouds became one. It is your power. The power that exceeds the limits of the entire family. And now it exists within you. The bearer of the seven-winged crest. Even looking back at the entire history of the Elmheim bloodline, there has never been anyone like this. One day, you will become a swordsman who surpasses even me. If you master all that power, one day you will become a swordsman who surpasses even me with these 6 wings, and surpasses even Roderick. In his mind at this moment, a thought emerged, I'll surpass him. His hand tightened on the hilt, light flashing on the blade. But great power always creates conflict. From behind his back, golden wings made of magic unfurled brilliantly. If the fact that I possess the 7 wings is revealed, the greater the power, the more risks and enemies there are. There will be those who are jealous, those who are resentful, and there will be those who plot to use you for their own purposes. And there will also be those who want to eliminate you as an obstacle. Hefried's hand reached out before him. By then, you won't have to regret your own helplessness. He reached out under the sunlight filtering through the canopy. Become strong, starting right now. Aster clasped his hands together tightly. That's right, I won't live a pathetic life like in my previous one ever again. Aster looked up, his eyes filled with determination. Thank you, Father. I will master the 7 wings and this sword as well. The whole family stood outside the main hall. 3 days later. Welcome home. Before the gate, Kadrivka stepped forward with spirit. The 2 useless Kadrivkas have returned. She covered her mouth and laughed, her face flashing with a mischievous look. Kadrivka spread her arms wide, her radiant smile enthusiastic, wanting to embrace everyone. Come on, my cute little sisters. Give your beloved sister a warm hug. Both of them ignored Kadrivka and rushed to hug Martha. Welcome home, Sister Martha. Oh my, she froze and turned to reproach, huh? What about hugging Sister Kud? Both of them frowned and explained, because Sister Kudo always messes up our hair. Not giving up, she turned away, avoiding their gaze. No way. A person like me who has trained their knightly spirit to perfection would never do something so unrefined. Seeing Alphen standing nearby, Kadrivka excitedly lunged into her arms. Alphen, have you been a good girl? While hugging and stroking Alphen's hair, why did you come over here? Seeing that someone was missing, Martha looked around and asked, huh? Where's Aster? Hefried hesitated and said, "Ah, if it's the boy." Upon hearing his name, her face changed. A terrifying light emanated from the other side of the forest. Aster was crazily practicing how to control the sword. This mystery. He gritted his teeth, sweat dripping. Damn it, still not working. He focused on the magic he had just created, then pondered carefully. I can shape the sword with magic, but I can only control it to this extent. Aster didn't stop trying to practice, carefully examining this sword. He wondered, "Father, how on earth can you control it so smoothly?" Suddenly, Kudrivka stepped closer, her tone mocking, "Showing off, aren't we?" Aster was surprised and asked, "You're back?" Sister Kudo didn't even bother to show her face to greet the person who just returned. She narrowed her eyes, her tone teasing, "Isn't that a bit too cold?" Each word became harder to hear. "Are we not even worth you worrying about? Or do you think you're special? I heard everything about the Sword Dance Festival. Even the Knight Academy is talking about you. Father must be very proud." However, Aster replied calmly, "On the other hand, for you, sister, I heard that even though you were still an intern, you have already achieved countless outstanding merits in your missions." On Kudrivka was the Knight Academy medal, and she was the only one to receive the honorary Knight medal this year, the Platinum medal. She confidently believed, of course. Otherwise, how could I inherit father's position? Her gaze became irritable. "I heard you refused the right of succession?" Aster worriedly scrambled to find a way to handle the situation. Is she trying to warn me? Father already told her. This is truly troublesome. That's not it. She smirked. "I just think that I still lack the ability to take on that position for now." Each step was decisive and strong, honestly, both father and I. Kudrivka drew her sword. "Both know very well what your dream is, yet how cruel." "What? What are you doing suddenly?" She decisively chopped down a tall tree nearby, causing it to fly powerfully toward him. Fortunately, he managed to dodge it in time. Aster's eyes clearly showed shock. "What are you doing suddenly?" Kudrivka coolly suggested, "Let's see. It's been a while. Let me test your strength a bit." She carried the sword on her shoulder, confident, "For the next blow, I'm going to be serious." Conversely, Aster worriedly tried to stop her. "Wait, Sister Cud, this sword isn't complete yet." But she didn't believe him. "Can you offer the same excuse when facing an enemy on the battlefield?" Aster laughed loudly. "An enemy?" Kudrivka knelt, her eyes full of desire to challenge him. A knight must always consider themselves standing in the middle of a battlefield. "If you keep holding back, I will crush you. Do you know that?" He was dazed and worried. This is no joke. Seeing her rush toward him with her sword in hand, "I tried so hard to keep my magic from exploding right now." His eyes were cold, but there was no other way. If not, she would really. He tried to hold off the force. "If not, Kudrivka would kill me." The whole forest was immediately in chaos. The scenery was disarrayed. Kudrivka just kept swinging her sword forward. "Your swordsmanship is as sharp as always, isn't it? I didn't expect you to keep up with my strikes, especially since I've improved them at the Knight Academy." She continued to speak, however. "What the hell is that half-baked swordsmanship?" Kudrivka swung her sword powerfully, making Aster stagger back. "Your ability to control magic is a complete mess." He tried to land on his feet safely. Aster couldn't believe it, immediately shouting. Sister Kudrivka wasn't yielding at all. He suddenly thought in his memory, she had always been like that. Just because I am the only boy in the Viscount family with the right of inheritance. Aster recalled the times he went through when he was young, and because she is a special existence, possessing a wing badge superior to anyone else in the family. He also remembered when Kudrivka used to chase after him, a sister like a storm, always looking for excuses to call him unfair to challenge him. But just as Aster was still thinking, she suddenly disappeared. "To put it bluntly, she is my nemesis." A voice suddenly rang out, startling him. "It really is you, Aster." Kudrivka appeared suddenly from high above. She tried her best to swing her sword, her steely voice ringing out, "You are not worthy of becoming the next clan head of this family." On this side, Martha calmly looked out the window. "Father, is it okay to leave those two like that?" She worriedly focused on her father. "In the worst case, this argument between siblings will end with a corpse, you know that, right?" However, Hefried didn't show any worry. In their own way, they are each other's excellent rivals. Although a bit reckless, it won't lead to such a tragic ending. Martha frowned slightly. "I hope you're right, Father." Then she slowly walked closer, returning to the main issue. "Father, why did you call us back from the Knight Academy? Surely it's not just to discuss the inheritance?" Hefried gently took something from the table. "That is indeed the case. Martha was truly stunned, unable to believe her eyes. This is what was taken out. It was a letter, summons from the Elmheim family. It seems the elders in power at the main branch want to see their grandson with their own eyes. She lowered her eyes and rubbed her chin thoughtfully. This is truly a serious problem. Hefried looked stern and glanced sideways. In the worst case, we might lose everything. On this side, Aster was trying to counterattack. Stop talking nonsense. I've already refused the inheritance. You heard it too. Right, Kudrivka? However, Kudrivka didn't hold back at all, and that is what makes me furious. She decisively swung her sword at Aster. It's so heavy, he muttered to himself. It felt like fighting a troll holding a sledgehammer. His hands suddenly turned flexibly. That action caused Kudrivka to stumble forward. He swung his sword high and shouted loudly, "Are you going to listen to me or not?" Before that series of actions, she wasn't worried at all. You're just running away, aren't you? Kudrivka calmly swung her sword decisively. The violent force made him stagger, his back hitting a tree. What kind of monstrous strength is this? Her sword continuously accumulated mana on its own. Just knowing how to swing a sword is third-rate. Kudrivka calmly gave her judgment. Controlling magic is second-rate. Only when mastering the way of the magic sword is one considered first-rate. Her eyes could not hide her disgust. How disappointing. Aster, Kudrivka slowly explained, the difference in wing badges directly reflects the amount of magic we can contain. People say that a one-wing difference means the power increases threefold. Then she held up 2 fingers in front of her. In other words, in terms of magic firepower and physical strength, my second-rate 5-winged self is completely inferior to your 7-winged self. Kudrivka's voice rang with a hint of teasing, yet you avoid head-to-head confrontation with that cowardly swordsmanship you like to use. She smirked, smiling mischievously. Can't you trust your own power to reach the ideal realm of swordsmanship? Kudrivka suddenly brought up the previous incident. Or are you afraid you'll lose control again like 3 years ago? At this moment, Aster realized with a jolt. Afraid? Me? Afraid of the power of the 7 wings? He looked at the sword in his hand, thinking to himself about everything. I never thought about that. Did I unconsciously suppress my own power? Doubts could not help but rise in Aster's heart. Is the reason this sword is so unstable because I have forcibly suppressed the magic? However, before he could think, Kudrivka used mana. Aster, you have everything I have always wanted. She gripped the sword tightly. If you keep letting that luck rot away without even knowing it, then I also have the right to be arrogant. After that, without hesitation, she lunged, hand everything over to me. Aster wouldn't lose, so he started to prepare a stance. 2 powerful streams of mana immediately touched each other. Seeing that scene, she was confused and couldn't help but shout, "It can push back my full power strike?" Aster spoke calmly and slowly, "Thank you, sister, thanks to you, I've awakened." Seeing him lunge, Kudrivka thought to herself, he lunges without even shaping the blade? She panicked and tried to swing her sword forward. Impossible, he already exhausted his magic from the previous strike. At this moment, Aster thought to himself, the endless source of magic hidden inside the 7 wings. He quietly calculated his next step. Currently, I can't control it all. But just for this moment, it doesn't maintain the sword shape, but gathers all the magic at the right time to attack. Kudrivka suddenly smiled, so you could think of something after all. You idiot. Aster suddenly mumbled something. This second life I happen to get. A strange mana mark suddenly appeared behind his back. I absolutely will not waste it. And neither will this power. Aster remembered the things important to him. Both the sword and the family. No matter how much I achieve, it still feels like I'm empty-handed. Those words left Kudrivka bewildered. Second life? A dense stream of mana was gathered by him. Because of that, Aster decisively aimed straight at her sword. He suddenly disappeared, making Kudrivka suspicious. Then she stuttered. The sword disappeared as if it were someone else. Aster whispered, I won't hold back anymore. At this moment, Kudrivka felt the strangeness. She started, opening her eyes wide with surprise. Kudrivka was stunned, slowly speaking, Is this my room? A voice suddenly sounded, Finally awake? She immediately said, Sister Martha, I woke up really late. Kudrivka suddenly sat up. Right after that, thinking back, she remembered the match with Aster. What on earth happened? However, she happily recounted, Aster was the one who carried you back here. While speaking, she pulled the curtain back. He said you fell asleep right in the middle of the match. He also said it was probably because you were tired from the long trip. She glanced at the sword. Not true, Kudrivka thought to herself, her heart full of thoughts. At the final moment, I thought I was slashed down by Aster. She couldn't help but marvel at what happened then. But in reality, before the collision, Aster had dispelled that magic blade. Even Kadrivka herself could feel it, and only the remnants of that magic brushed past her body. Thinking about it carefully, there's no way Aster would kill his own sister. She couldn't suppress the doubt in her heart. But at that exact moment, I truly thought I was going to be killed. Kadrivka suddenly smiled. He really is an annoying little brother to the end, even though he's clearly much smaller than me. Then she suddenly picked up the sword. Sister Martha, is Aster going to the front lines again this time? Kadrivka aggressively tossed the blanket. I don't accept that match. Martha suddenly interrupted. If it's Aster, he has already left. You know that, right? That sentence left her completely stunned. She calmly explained, there was a summons from the main house sent specifically to Aster, so what about father just now? You don't know? Her face at this moment showed extreme confusion. She panicked and shouted loudly, I never heard about that. At this moment, the carriage moved rapidly on the road. Aster remained calm, looking out the window. Hefried spoke slowly to instruct him, the people we are about to meet from now on are the elders who secretly assist the Elmheim family like shadows. He continued to explain, former heads of the main family and the branches, or predecessors under Elmheim, those who still hold enormous influence even after withdrawing from the front lines. The rulers in the shadows. Then Hefried sighed worriedly, those elders, since I adopted you until now, have never shown interest even once. And yet, they call you here at this exact time. However, Aster only turned his head calmly. Perhaps it's because of the incident at the Sword Dance Festival. He recounted what he knew. The old fogies of Elmheim value the family's reputation more than money, honor, or even their lives. I've heard that. And those who tarnish that reputation will be thrown into the beast cage and fed to them. As soon as he finished, Hefried looked at his son worriedly. Aster, where did you hear those rumors? He awkwardly explained, I heard it somewhere before. Regardless, I've already prepared myself to be executed or exiled. He frowned, staring intently. Are you really all right? Going out without any escort? Yet Aster replied with extreme calm, it's fine. I originally planned to leave just as my sisters arrived. He smiled, gently turning his head, especially regarding Sister Kudo. If I, the one she hates, am not around, she can finally spread her wings and fly freely. After that, Aster gently touched his sword. Thanks to Sister Kudo, I've started to see through how to master this gram sword. He frowned, gripping the sword tightly. I feel I can draw out more of the seven-winged power than before. So, from now on, whatever happens to me, please don't save me. Aster continued, I've already prepared to survive on my own. Hefried's brows furrowed even tighter. Aster, you. Yet a voice suddenly rang out. Survive on your own what? The youngest brother is acting all cocky. Aster could not help but be surprised by that voice. He was astonished, unable to believe his eyes. Outside the glass door, Kadrivka suddenly appeared. Sister Kudo, why are you here? She didn't pay any attention to Aster's words. Don't tell me you ran all the way here. Kadrivka calmly climbed inside. Don't you find it cruel? Leaving quietly without saying a word to your sister. She said sulkily, I heard everything. You were summoned by the grand elders of the main house, right? Even Martha and I have never been summoned even once. Hefried awkwardly interrupted, Kadrivka, I think you understand, but taking you to the main house is. She gently sat down next to Aster. I understand. I heard father called us here to oversee everything while he's away. I understand very well. Kadrivka's cold gaze flickered to the side, but this summons means something is happening, so we must be that careful. Her voice rang out again, Sister Martha already said it. You know, Aster might not come back. Hearing that, Aster gently comforted her, you're exaggerating. I'm just meeting them and talking. Whether I return safely or not is another issue. But then Kadrivka suddenly pointed straight at his face. Listen, Aster. I hate you a lot. Harsh, sharp questions rang out one after another. Because you're a man, because of the 7 wings, because you always get special treatment, because you're stronger than me, your sister, and because you keep acting like an adult even though you're just the little brother. All of those things. Aster stared at his sister, his heart full of worries. The next words from Kadrivka made both of them stare intently. But even so, you are still my precious family. No matter how strong you are, no matter how much you act like an adult, you are still my little brother. She suddenly stood up, so come back properly, and then we'll have another rematch. Kadrivka decisively threw the door wide open. If you retreat while you're in the lead, I won't forgive you. Without another word, she unexpectedly jumped out of the carriage. Aster could only helplessly look out. What did she come here for? Hefried's eyes lowered slightly, quietly praising, she's a good rival, isn't she? In his heart at that moment, he secretly thought, but thank you, sister. Watching her figure fade into the distance, his heart surged with determination. I will definitely return. As soon as he set foot at the destination, a clear voice rang out, "Welcome back, Lord Hefried." The soldier said coldly, "The Grand Elder is already waiting for you inside." Hefried bluntly refused, "No need for a guide, I know the way." However, the man still replied nonchalantly, "I'm afraid that's not possible, sir. I have received orders to personally escort both of you inside." He intently observed them, thinking to himself, as expected, they didn't call me here out of love for their grandchildren. At least the atmosphere here doesn't seem like that at all. Aster's gaze watched quietly. But he glanced at the castle, so nostalgic. "It's been a long time since I came back home." Hefried suddenly said, "I'm sure you already know this." His voice was deep and warm, slowly instructing, "But today, you must absolutely not lose your composure. Even if they say anything to you," Aster said nonchalantly, "that depends on their attitude, too." Hefried helplessly closed his eyes tightly. "That is exactly why I said they are trouble." He continued to ramble, "Listen, the people we are about to meet are..." At this moment, Aster's gaze flickered over the training yard. Darius's figure was nowhere to be seen. With his dominant hand crushed, it would be difficult for him to return to duty soon. Hefried's voice pulled him out of his train of thought. "Are you listening, Aster?" Faced with his father's gaze, Aster awkwardly replied, "Yes, of course I am." He asserted firmly, "Today I will be obedient and silent. Besides, sister already warned me that it's best to return in one piece." The room door slowly creaked open. The accompanying soldier immediately reported, "Lord Hefried and his son have arrived." A voice that wasn't very friendly suddenly rang out, "You've finally come. It's been more than 10 years, hasn't it?" The old man continued, "How is it?" "My grandson, Hefried." Hefried immediately knelt, bowing respectfully, "Long time no see, sixth patriarch." He then corrected his words, "No, it should be great-grandfather." Aster glanced at the person in front of him. That was the monster lurking in the shadows of the Elmheim family, the sixth patriarch of the main family, Zenny's Ain Elmheim. Aster immediately swept his eyes across and guessed that the others were high-ranking figures under the Elmheim family. He looked at each person leisurely. I recognized a few faces from the sword dance festival, but in Aster's heart, a name suddenly flashed. "Roderick isn't here?" As if he had seen through everything, Zenny spoke up, "He's not here, brat." The old man explained slowly, "He is the knight commander directly under the royal family." Zenny's leaned on his cane, slowly continuing, "He doesn't have time to worry about these trivial matters. That's why these old men are helping him handle internal administrative issues." Aster frowned, glancing at the old man. "In my previous life, I didn't even have a chance to meet him, so I didn't care." He secretly guessed all possibilities. But gathering this many officials without the appearance of the current head, for someone who has retired, he seems to still hold a lot of power. After that, Hefried unexpectedly asked, "And what exactly are those trivial matters?" Zenny's replied calmly, "You've probably already guessed, right?" In his voice was a hint of mockery. "I heard your pet caused a huge scene at the sword dance festival." Anxiety immediately surrounded Aster. "Just as I thought, it's about that." Faced with the questioning, Hefried replied leisurely in defense of his son, "Regarding that issue, the current head, Roderick, should have already resolved it properly himself." However, the elders there immediately spoke up with sarcasm. "That was just a play to deceive the public. It doesn't change the fact that the reputation of the Elmheim family has been tarnished." All those venomous words immediately poured onto his head. Adopting a child of unknown origin into the family from the beginning was a mistake. We could have turned a blind eye if he had remained harmless, but once he dared to show his fangs to the main family, the story is completely different. There is no other way but to expel him. And of course, you will not escape appropriate punishment either. Lord Hefried. Aster, standing next to him, couldn't help himself and immediately retorted, "Wait, I'm the one who did everything. My father has nothing to do with it." However, Hefried just shook his head slightly, signaling him to stop. Seeing that, Aster stopped dead. The words choked in his throat. Showing no mercy, Zenny's continued to offer criticisms. "It seems your way of teaching is still very poor, allowing a child to casually interrupt the conversation of adults." The old man slowly stood up. "We lead over 12,000 knights under our command. We carry the weight of the name Elmheim on our shoulders. However, the knights are not a unified force." Faced with Zenny's words, everyone around looked at them with contempt. There are countless people watching from the shadows waiting for the opportunity to seize the highest position. The old man didn't stop rambling. "Naturally, that includes those present in this room." Finishing his sentence, Zenny slowly stepped forward. "We simply want peace of mind. We need proof that you are not someone who will harm the Elmheim family. The old man coldly raised the sword hilt, placing it close to Hefried's face. He looked on in confusion. This is... Zenny's coldly reminded him of the old story, you remember, right? When you failed to protect your master and dragged the honor of the Elmheim family into the mud. You showed no mercy. The old man coldly made a proposal. Right in this room, you let Roderick cut off an arm. With a cold gaze, he gave an order full of authority. This time, prove your loyalty by taking that brat's head. Faced with those words, Aster's gaze could not hide his surprise. Not stopping there, Zenny's continued in a malicious tone, if you can do that, everything will be forgiven. Despite the pressure, Hefried firmly refused. I refuse. He spoke without fear. I would rather kill myself than lay a hand on my own child. The boy next to him looked at his father in confusion. Zenny's replied uncomfortably, so that's how it is. Very good. Then he aggressively raised his cane. If that's the case, then just die. Your wife, your daughter, and that brat, not a single one will be spared. As soon as he finished, all the soldiers rushed forward. From today on, the Viscount family will be officially erased. In a split second, both Aster and Hefried were tightly surrounded. Faced with that situation, he spoke slowly. What are you afraid of? Great-grandfather. That tone made Zenny's turn his head in anger. What? Aster coldly questioned. A bunch of grown men huddled together in trembling. How pathetic. If you are that afraid of being bitten by your own dog, then just expel or discard me as you wish. After that, he suddenly loosened his tie. But if you intend to touch my family, even just one finger. That action left Hefried standing next to him stunned. He quickly pulled up his shirt. I'm sorry, father. I guess I couldn't remain obediently silent after all. The knights there couldn't help but feel surprised. What is that? That is... They stammered, looking at Aster's back in confusion. The mark on his back. The mark on his back immediately glowed. If that happens, this seven-winged user will become an enemy of the Elmheim family. Aster coldly glanced at them. You had all better think very carefully. The crowd around was extremely puzzled. No way. Wait, isn't that the seven-winged sigil? They still didn't believe their eyes. Surely it's not a fake? For hundreds of years, has that thing appeared on a human body? But that mark is clearly... Jenny's voice was also a bit confused. Kid, do you understand the weight of the thing you are showing us? Aster turned back and replied firmly, I understand. I heard the more wings there are, the more astonished people will be. This decisive tone from Aster made the green-haired Viscount extremely excited. He clapped his hands and laughed continuously. Seeing everyone directing their attention toward him, he forced a smile. Forgive me. Please continue, everyone. On this side, Jenny's began to explain. First, the sigil is a part that produces magic given to humans by the spirits since ancient times. By passing that power down from generation to generation, humans have continuously honed its power. Yet, until now, no human has ever reached the seven wings, except for the spirit race, the ones who created that sigil. Aster then questioned, are you assuming that I am from the spirit race? He continued, if your seven wings are real, then very possibly. Successive disadvantageous remarks directed at Aster's position made Hefried extremely worried in his heart. Aster spoke up, I am the son of a Viscount. Right now, I don't care about my body anymore. All I want to know now is whether you are ready to face me or not. Even if I am expelled from the Elmheim family, there will be countless noble families rushing to welcome this seven-winged user. For those who are always afraid of rebellion like you, that would be a huge threat. If possible, they would want to keep me as close as possible. A symbol of the seven wings, even surpassing Grand Duke Roderick. This assertion startled everyone else in the room. Aster thought to himself at this moment, just like the old man said earlier. Even the Elmheim family is not a unified force. The truth is, a rebellion is about to happen, a large-scale civil war that will swallow this whole country. I have seen that future once already. To keep myself and the Viscount family alive through what's coming, I want to clearly define it right here. Who is an ally and who is an enemy? Even if it means accepting a few risks. Aster's somewhat arrogant words intrigued Jenny's. Do you truly believe that you are that valuable? There is no proof that your seven wings are real. Aster smiled, his voice sharp. If you don't believe it, then go ahead and kill me. If you do that, it means a war between me and all of you. While speaking, Aster felt a bit of fear in his heart. If the Elmheim family is truly serious, killing someone like me wouldn't take any effort at all. How will they act now? Will they bite the bait? On the outside, the green-haired Viscount clapped his hands one more time. Then he stood up and joined the conversation. It seems this conversation is just going around in circles. Grand Elder, how about we set a test for the brat right here? Hearing that, the blonde-haired Viscount exclaimed in surprise, Count Maze, what are you doing? Maze replied, you want to see it too, right? The power of the 7 wings. It's not too late to decide his fate after that. He turned to say to everyone, what do you think? This is the territory of the greatest martial arts family in the world. I am sure that there are 1 or 2 suitable tests around here. Aster kept his eyes on him, assessing, Count Maze. Is that right? No doubt about it. Aster's mouth curled up, he is an ally. Hearing that, Jenny's at this moment was also a bit agreeable. Very well. Then follow me. Disciplining a grandson who doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut is, after all, the duty of a grandfather. They then proceeded to an iron cage looking down into a deep abyss. Is this the test area? It's too dark. He began to explain, behind this darkness is an underground tunnel connected to the water pipe system. This place used to be a shelter for emergencies. But now, I am holding a magic beast in there. The test is very simple, just defeat that magic beast. That is all. Hefried at this moment turned to reproach, oh my. You are truly a troublesome brat. And after I reminded you so many times to keep the existence of the 7 wings a secret, Aster turned back and smiled, I can't hide something this prominent forever. This is also a good opportunity. He worriedly reminded, don't be careless, you hear me? Aster then nodded and immediately jumped down below. I'm going. Hefried looked toward Count Maze with tearful eyes. He at this moment wore a slightly amused smile. After a few seconds, Aster landed. This place was an extremely humid place. And it was truly dark, but not to the point where I couldn't see anything. Aster's gaze flickered when he saw something. He was startled, huh? That is. Above, Jenny's reminded, I also gave him a chance to regain his honor. But he only knew how to cry miserably until the very last minute. Truly unbearable. And this was the explanation for Darius's absence. Looking at the monster gnawing on Darius's body, Jenny's continued to remind, don't disappoint me, brat. Aster at this moment, without a moment's hesitation, drew his sword, standing alone to confront the monster. When the monster discovered someone had arrived, it turned back, baring its fangs and roaring loudly. Now the test begins. Aster stared at the giant monster standing in front of him. The moment he clearly saw it, the rumors that people had whispered for so long finally had an answer. People still say the Elmheim family secretly locks magic beasts in the mansion. Now one is standing towering right in front of him. At this moment, Aster suddenly thought of a quite unexpected sentence. Just this once, I actually feel a bit sorry for you poor guys who grew up in this house full of monsters. Suddenly, the monster roared a terrifying sound, the vibration echoing through the entire hall. Its giant body rushed straight at Aster at a terrifying speed, but Aster didn't take a single step back. He calmly raised his sword, channeled magic into the blade, and swung a clean slash, so light that it was terrifying. The blade pierced straight through the monster's body. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The monster was cut in half, 2 giant halves of its body collapsed onto the floor heavily. The entire hall fell into a deathly silence. Many nobles retreated in horror for a few steps, but Aster remained calm as if nothing had happened. He said nonchalantly, Sister Kudo is much scarier than this one. At that moment, a strange thing happened. From the monster's corpse, a stream of unnatural dark energy slowly rose. Aster's face immediately hardened. I misjudged. This is not a normal magic beast, this is an undead monster and undead. Aster's reaction immediately grabbed his father's attention. With clear worry, he admitted that he had always suspected something extremely dangerous was hidden in the deepest room of the basement. However, the Grand Elder only smiled slightly with a calm, amused tone. He began to reveal the truth. This monster was originally attracted by the smell of fresh blood and death, so it was locked in the basement. It's the perfect environment for it, because the corpses here are countless. But the scary thing is that this undead cannot be killed by conventional means. Cutting it off, burning it, both are useless. It was intentionally preserved to do 2 things. One day, use it to test the strength of the sword, and for now, use it to dispose of human corpses. Hearing this, a blonde-haired baron among the nobles frowned. Capturing an undead alive is extremely difficult, even experienced knights struggle. Yet the Grand Elder actively created one. The Grand Elder's answer was ice cold: if the brat dies, it only proves he is a fake. A badge with no wings is worth nothing, not even worth being an ornament. He even added a sentence even more venomous: even if he dies, he is still very useful. Even if he dies, things are even more convenient. While the conversation continued, the Count quietly observed Aster. After the boy's confident declarations earlier, he couldn't help but hope Aster wouldn't fall so easily. As for the battle, it continued. Aster collided repeatedly with the undead, fighting while observing very carefully. There is something very wrong with this monster. Every sword slash had almost no resistance, like cutting into smoke. As for its regeneration ability, it was terrifying. The wound that just appeared healed instantly. Even for an undead, this level of recovery was abnormal. Aster quickly remembered what was written in the guidebook: they have no life force to be completely destroyed. There are only two ways: sunlight or holy weapons. If you don't have both, it's best to avoid fighting. But Aster didn't intend to retreat. If he defeated this monster while still having to use conventional methods, then his seven-wing title would have no meaning either. He would prove his power with pure strength. The moment he made the decision, Aster's power exploded. A stream of terrifying pressure radiated from his body. The air around seemed to explode. The surrounding walls shattered in the blink of an eye, the stone floor cracked open, and debris flew everywhere in the hall. The horrified audience exclaimed, "What kind of magic is this? So this is the power of the seven wings? What is happening down there? Has the brat defeated it already?" Every question rang out above. After the explosion caused the entire cage to be submerged in dust, and then waiting for the layer of dust to slowly fade, Aster's body appeared without a single wound. Not a single wound at all. The Grand Elder saw that and clicked his tongue, saying, "What a pity." Then suddenly, the monster raised its giant leg. Before Aster could react, its foot stomped hard on the ground, the entire ground shaking violently. Aster was buried under the monster's giant foot. His father screamed in panic, but the Count immediately stopped him. "You don't intend to do mundane things like rushing down to save him, do you, Lord Highfried?" His father replied, "Do you really want me to stand idly by and watch him die?" Count Maze saw his discomfort and spoke up to reassure him. "Come now, please stay calm for a moment." Then he cast a glance downward, smiling. "Look closely down there. It seems that Brad is brewing some kind of plan in his head." The monster thought it had one, but under its foot, Aster was laughing. Everything was happening exactly as he had planned. The monster looked a bit thinner than it was initially. Aster suddenly erupted with power, stabbing his sword straight up. The blade pierced deep into the monster's chest, blood spraying from its mouth, pouring onto Aster. That moment, he knew the process had begun. His tactic was simple: stab again and again, stab forever, stab until the monster was completely dead. While observing, Aster's father realized something strange. The rhythm and movements of Aster were so familiar, but the more he looked, the more he was sure this wasn't a technique he had seen in the past. This was something completely different. Then suddenly, the whole area began to collapse. The ground shook violently, giant cracks spread, walls collapsed, structures shattered, everyone panicked. But amidst that chaos, the Grand Elder remained motionless. His eyes were locked on Aster. And in that moment, he finally understood. This is not normal power. This is the true power of the seven wings. In just one moment, everything had changed completely. The blonde-haired Baron was thrown away like trash, flying across the hall and crashing hard into the ground, unable to even lift his head. What on earth just happened? The blonde Baron panicked, stammering, "Where did that immortal monster go?" Jennings didn't bother to reply, he just looked down, and the truth was painfully obvious. The immortal undead and the terrifying mana explosion had vanished completely, not through technique or a special move, but simply through overwhelming, absolute power. At the bottom of the pit, Aster lay motionless, with only faint wisps of energy still circling his body. Jennings narrowed his eyes. This wasn't refinement, this was raw dominance, using a terrifying amount of mana and superior quality to force reality itself to its knees. He turned to Hefried and asked, "Did you do this?" Hefried shook his head, his gaze still fixed on his son. "Sir, even I didn't expect him to improve to this extent." Count Maze stepped forward, his voice filled with anticipation. "So, has Aster passed the test then?" Jenny slowly walked past the nobles, his voice calm but decisive. "I have no objections." Aster quickly ran to the edge of the pit and shouted, "Aster has finished fighting, come on up." A slightly exhausted voice came from the pit. "The chain got caught in the vortex. You guys throw the rope down for me." A moment later, inside Jenny's private room, the air was suffocatingly heavy. Jenny's looked at Aster silently for a moment before asking, "Are you sure?" "There won't be a second chance," Aster replied without a moment's hesitation. "I have no interest in the inner circle." He calmly explained, "If I stay here, the cousins will never be at ease." So, he chose to stay with the Hefried family. Jenny's gave a slight sneer, still pretending to be humble. His gaze sharpened. "But your ambition, I can already see it clearly in those eyes." The room fell silent. Jenny's asked directly, "Do you intend to brandish your sword against this house or aim for Roderick?" Aster stiffened under the terrifying pressure. Jenny's leaned back, telling him to relax. "I'm not here to probe your motives." Aster stiffened under the terrifying pressure. "Roderick is already too strong. If your existence can keep him in check, then I accept it." But Jenny's also warned coldly, "And if one day you turn your blade against me, the outcome will be very clear." Aster nodded silently in acknowledgement. As he walked out, he truly understood, Jenny's was absolutely not a person to be underestimated. Outside, Hefried immediately ran over to ask what had happened. Aster replied, "I was invited into the inner circle, but I refused." Hefried sighed heavily. Before the atmosphere could grow more tense, Count Maze chimed in, laughing loudly. "What a pity, your future would have been much easier in the inner circle." Aster looked at him. "Then why did you help me earlier?" Maze laughed heartily, "Just testing a gutsy kid." His voice suddenly turned serious. "From this moment on, you are officially a Seven Wings." Having said that, he glanced to the side. The surrounding nobles were deathly quiet, but their minds were filled with greed, fear, and calculations. Some wanted to seize his power, others saw him as a threat to be eliminated, and some were thinking of how to exploit him. Maze placed a hand on Aster's shoulder, laughing. "The Seven Wings title is incredibly valuable. Plenty of people will be coming after you." Aster asked in return, "Are you one of them?" Maze smiled, "I'm the head of the Knights Academy. Recruiting talent is my job, after all." Hefried suggested going home to tell Aster's younger sister, thinking she would be thrilled to hear the news. Aster smiled faintly, pointing to the wounds that were still bandaged. "My mother will faint the moment she sees these." Scene shift. A knight knelt before Roderick to report, young Master Darius died during Jenny's trial. Roderick showed no emotion, simply nodding in acknowledgement before asking further about Hefried being summoned and what had occurred. The knight quickly reported everything. After listening, Roderick said calmly, "The Seven Wings has returned." The knight was astonished. "You knew beforehand?" "At this rate, the balance of power that has been maintained within the family for so long will collapse." "Shouldn't we take action?" he suggested. Roderick sneered, "Just leave it be. If just one incident like this could shake Elmheim, then Elmheim would have collapsed long ago. No need to rush, the Seven Wings will eventually belong to me. Before that, let Aster grow up and see how far he can go." The gates of the Knights Academy opened. On the day of the entrance exam, the candidates crowded in. Whispers broke out as some people recognized Aster. Everyone was surprised because he had now fully matured, standing there extremely calm and confident. A young man stepped forward and placed paperwork on the table. The content clearly stated, "The state and the Knight's Order will not be responsible for any casualties during the exam." After signing, candidates had to present their wing badge. The instructor asked, "Name?" Aster replied gently, "Aster of Elmheim." The instructor paused for a second and looked up sharply. Aster was now a mature young man, smiling very lightly, his voice slightly lazy. "My wing badge is a bit hard to display, can I use my face instead?" As Aster walked into the examination hall, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense with ambition and pride. Just then, a man called his name aloud, drawing everyone's attention. He pointed at Aster, his voice full of disdain. "You look strange, I've never seen your face before. You must be from some mediocre town. This is no place for an outsider like you." This hall was filled with the most elite nobles, the true cream of the crop, all gathered to participate in the prestigious selection exam to become Knights of the Kingdom. Aster remained calm and replied clearly, "This is exactly where I belong." Hearing this, Vigor was startled, but his surprise quickly turned into annoyance. He continued, "Everyone here has gone through strict and grueling training. Even so, they still persist in pursuing their dream of walking the path of glory for the elite by retaking the exam over and over." He scoffed, pointing to the small sword hanging at Aster's waist. "A rookie holding a cheap sword like you dares to stand here? This isn't a playground for a greenhorn swordsman like you. If you're just here to sightsee, get lost." Those around whispered familiarly, "It's Vigor again, he bullies the rookies every year, doesn't he?" During the murmurs, two people shifted their attention to Aster. They realized the target might not be a nobody, Isn't that the rumored Elmheim kid? They whispered. Do you know who that is? That's the rumored Seven Wings, Aster. The name immediately made the atmosphere tense. Vigor repeated in shock, 7 wings? At this moment, someone from behind stepped closer, recognized Aster, and was surprised. Finally know who you are. The person who arrived was Gurion. He smiled slyly and spoke, long time no see, cousin. Since no one knows where or when you were born, I'll take the liberty of calling you cousin. Aster replied, regarding Darius, I am very sorry. Gurion shrugged, not caring, no, you don't need to bother. A person who brings shame to the family deserves to die. Now that he's dead, I actually feel more relieved. Even though he was only 1 year older than me, he always gave orders and bossed people around. So to me, he was just a nuisance. Whether the Seven Wings title is real or fake, you shouldn't underestimate the main family members, because no one here can protect you anymore. After hearing Gurion's words, the crowd began to gossip. 2 people from Elmheim participating this year? How unlucky. They are still in a bitter conflict between the main and branch families, and no one wants to get involved in this dangerous business. Realizing Aster was from Elmheim, Vigor became anxious. Are you really Elmheim? Aster smiled and held out his hand, introducing himself calmly and modestly. Nice to meet you. Just call me Aster. The scene shifted to the first exam location, where the atmosphere grew tense and expectant. At the highest point, Hoster spoke loudly to the candidates. You have made it this far. I commend your bravery and patriotism. Hoster emphasized, Freezer's Kingdom Knights are not like the provincial knights in the countryside. We serve the king directly, protect the king, and our glorious swords ready to sacrifice our lives for him. Therefore, there is no place for a useless sword here. You must demonstrate your true value. Treat today's exam as a battlefield. Hearing this, Aster smiled slightly, but sweat beaded on his face. He thought to himself, his words sound ridiculous, but I can't deny their meaning. I've finally returned to this place, the path to becoming a kingdom knight, the path I was once denied when I was wingless. Ahead was a world of power that had once been completely out of my reach. At the pinnacle of that world, one person still reigned, the commander-in-chief of the Kingdom Knights, Roderick at Elmheim. With a burning determination, Aster vowed to himself, just wait, Roderick. I will catch up to you in the shortest time possible. But first, I have to pass this selection exam. Hoster's voice echoed everywhere with authority. It's time to begin, he declared without hesitation. The first exam, the Arrow Tower Challenge. The moment the words were spoken, the atmosphere changed violently. From unseen directions, arrows flew like rain. They struck the candidates with ruthless precision. One person was hit right in the eye and collapsed instantly. The suddenness and cruelty of the attack shocked the crowd. Aster stood frozen, witnessing the horrific scene before him. Hoster continued calmly, the last one left standing will be the winner. Immediately, thousands of arrows began to pour down from every direction. The sky seemed to turn hostile as the rain of arrows poured out relentlessly. Many people were hit immediately and fell, panic spreading like wildfire. The remaining candidates began to scatter out of survival instinct. Amidst the chaos, desperate cries rang out. Someone shouted in confusion, what should we do now? Another yelled, run, staying still is certain death. A few tried to organize, everyone group up, cover each other, block the incoming arrows. From above, Hoster observed calmly as if anticipating, the retakers from last year already know how to react. But even so, the survival rate is only about 30%. These measures are only surface level and will soon hit their limits. What I want to see is superior problem-solving ability, the kind that only those with wing badges can manage. Amidst the chaos, Aster stood perfectly still. He didn't run or defend himself immediately. As arrows tore through the battlefield around him, Vigor saw it and was annoyed and confused. What is that idiot doing standing still? Did he faint from fear? Gurion stood not far away, smirking, how weak. Just stand there and die like a hedgehog. Suddenly, Aster moved. With clear intent, he drew his sword. A brilliant red aura erupted from his body, radiating immense strength and power. Every arrow that flew towards him was blocked with ease. The sight left everyone astonished. Those who witnessed it could hardly believe their eyes. He swatted away all those arrows? A faint smile appeared on Aster's lips. Instead of retreating or just defending, he met the challenge with complete dominance. Go ahead and shoot everything you've got at me. Aster stood alone in the middle of an endless rain of arrows, but not a single one could touch him. Vigor witnessed the terrifying scene, completely shaken, shock and horror stifling him. He stared at Aster, stammering, "Mon. What kind of monster is this? What is he?" Realizing not a single arrow could pierce through him, the examiner standing from afar also observed everything. He showed clear amazement, but unlike vigor, his reaction carried interest and enjoyment. He carefully analyzed Aster's power and concluded he was swirling released mana to create a powerful aura. The precision and control behind this technique were truly impressive. He seemed to have wrapped himself in a raging storm. Gradually, the violent red energy storm began to settle. The students around watched in fear mixed with awe. It stopped? Is it all over? As the dust settled, the examiner noted the situation. Many candidates who should have died had survived strangely. This result impressed him with the overwhelming momentum. He noted that more candidates survived than expected, but that was fine. He praised their bravery and asked them to look at the bodies strewn about. Those still standing have officially passed the first exam. Giving them no time to rest, he immediately ordered, "Follow me to the next exam location." Among them, Vigor panted, still trembling. He complained, "Oh, what a devil of an examiner. Even though we just went through a continuous rain of arrows." Conversely, Aster maintained his calm demeanor, a faint smile on his lips as he looked at Vigor. "Are you tired already?" Aster's calm, almost indifferent attitude only made Vigor more annoyed. "Why are you so calm? What on earth did we just go through?" From above, the examiner continued to observe Aster closely. He studied him with interest, released a massive amount of mana without showing any signs of fatigue. So this is Aster of the Seven Wings. With growing anticipation, he was eager to see more, especially the type of combat Aster would show in the next stage. In the crowd, Durian's eyes remained fixed on Aster. His face stiffened as memories flooded back. He remembered what his mother had said before this exam: "You must stop Aster at all costs. It concerns the future of our Elmheim family." The pressure of responsibility weighed heavily on him. As Durian thought, tension mounted in his heart. A moment later, the next stage of the exam arrived. The examiner stood before all the candidates and announced a new rule to ensure fairness: everyone will use identical swords. He ordered, "Exchange your current weapons before the test begins." Vigor heard this and was annoyed. Why is there such an annoying rule? Aster asked calmly, "Were previous exams different?" Vigor explained, "For intermediate knights like us, the swords used are usually similar, so it doesn't make much difference." Vigor explained, "For intermediate knights like us, the swords used are usually similar, so it doesn't make much difference." He implied that Aster's special sword was being wary of due to its uniqueness or potential danger. Aster listened to every detail, not revealing much emotion. At this moment, Durian approached from behind with a calm but mocking tone. "Cousin, have you tamed a lackey?" Vigor immediately flared up and yelled, "Who was a subordinate?" Durian just smiled, maintaining his calm. "If I remember correctly, you are the heir of the Baron Smite's family, right?" Then with a slight but sharp smile, he leaned close and whispered a threatening sentence. "A third-rate noble from the countryside like you dares to side with my opponent? If so, you will have to suffer great consequences." Having said that, Durian turned and left, leaving a heavy tense atmosphere. Vigor was shaken, his initial confidence completely vanished, replaced by fear. "Young Master Durian, I have nothing to do with him." Observing the exchange, Aster couldn't help but offer a wry smile. He thought to himself, the situation has become awkward. The surrounding air had clearly changed, becoming much more tense and uneasy. All candidates moved to the next exam location. The examiner began to explain the rules for the second exam. The first exam was about offense and defense. This time, everyone will be divided into 3 teams and fight to occupy the opponent's camp in the forest. Aster and the other students listened intently. The examiner continued, "Raising your team's flag on the platform in the camp counts as occupation. The team that occupies 2 or more camps when the evening bell rings will be the winning team. Also, note that you must not destroy or steal flags. However, other than that, no action is prohibited. The sword issued to you basically allows you to kill your opponents." Immediately after, the examiner announced the teams. "Now I will announce the list of members for the teams that will face off in the exam. Durian's team gets the red flag. The white-haired student's team gets the yellow flag. Aster's team gets the green flag." All 3 teams were ready to win. As the exam began, Aster saw a smoke signal rising into the sky. He informed his teammates, "The smoke signal marks the start of the test. Each camp has 3 flags, and to win, you need to occupy 2 or more camps, including your own." Vigor gradually understood the situation. Only one of the 3 teams can pass this exam. Aster nodded in confirmation, but he sensed anxiety from his teammates. Others who were already uneasy pointed out, does this mean we have to fight the Elmheim family? That's a bit difficult. Aster felt awkward when hearing that. Vigor, clearly scared, explained, don't you understand? We are afraid of being retaliated against by the Elmheim family. The opponent is the young master of the main house. Even if it's just an exam, slashing a sword at him could ruin our futures. In the worst case, we might never dare to call ourselves knights again. Even our family and entourage could be slaughtered. No one wants to be the enemy of such a powerful family. Then do you intend to give up on this exam? Is it worth continuing the exam? There will be other exams in the future. Better that than betting your whole life. Vigor smiled bitterly. You probably can't understand the feelings of those of us who are weak. Aster ran quickly forward. He hadn't expected to be in a situation of being isolated in a team battle like this. At the same time, he understood their fear. For knights, the Elmheim family is an autocratic family that cannot be opposed, and Gurion is the symbol of that terrifying dominance. When Aster remembered Vigor's words about not understanding the weak, he reflected on his own position. From an outsider's perspective, he was still seen as part of that family. Even so, he noticed everything around was too quiet. No battles had started, making him wonder if everyone was being cautious or if something else was happening. As he entered the exam area, he was startled. The captain of the yellow team was already there. He stood with his flag. It seemed Aster's arrival alone had been anticipated. Oh, didn't think you'd dare to come here alone like that. Everything happened exactly as he said. Aster was confused, especially when realizing the opponent had lowered his own camp flag. Who is he? The blonde student said nonchalantly, I just happened to have a little free time. Then he threw his flag into the air and stated clearly, I want you to stay and keep me company for a while. Aster was astonished, not understanding the meaning behind this action. The blonde student drew his sword, signaling the start of the confrontation. What exactly does this mean? At the same time, somewhere else in the forest, a large alliance had formed. Gurion's red team and the yellow team had joined hands with the common goal of defeating Aster. Gurion smiled confidently, I will show you, cousin, how the Elmheim family truly fights. Aster stepped forward and asked directly, the opponent is definitely the yellow team, so why are you hanging the red flag? At this moment, the blonde person replied calmly, the reason is simple. Because an alliance has been formed between Elmheim and me. Having said that, he began to release his aura from his sword. The surrounding air immediately became tense and heavy. A mysterious observer appeared and explained this person's identity. He is the eldest son of the Nolan family, a family famous as the founders of royal swordsmanship. His name is Christopher Nolan. He is a 5-wing badge bearer. The observer continued, in the first exam, he was overshadowed by the 7-wing genius, so he wasn't very prominent. But in the Arrow Tower test, only 2 people passed without changing their expression. That is 7-wing Aster and 5-wing Christopher Nolan. Both are outstanding talents from Caballero, possessing terrifying potential. It's a pity that 2 such talented people have to face each other in this situation. Hearing this, Aster immediately asked, this is an alliance with Elmheim, right? Do you really understand what you are doing? Even if you do this, in the end, only one team will win. Christopher listened and calmly blocked Aster's attack. I understand perfectly. And because Elmheim is on our side, I have decided that the main family will be the winning team. He continued to explain, perhaps right now my teammates are together with Elmheim heading to attack your base. Hearing those words, Aster suddenly felt danger surge in his heart, thinking that the situation was bad. Smith and the others were in serious danger. He continued to face Christopher and asked, Gurion threatened you, didn't he? He said something like, if you dare to oppose Elmheim, what will happen? Christopher stepped forward without hesitation. No one intentionally stands in front of a speeding carriage when they know they will be crushed. We knight nobles exist in a strict class society. Such actions are just the natural order of things. Just as he spoke, he unleashed a powerful attack filled with overwhelming force, while declaring, this is also the natural way a noble should act. Aster tried to block the blow, but even while defending, he felt the pressure was spiraling out of control. Looking at the broken sword, Aster realized something was wrong and thought to himself, this sword definitely has a problem. Did that examiner earlier intentionally give me a defective item? In the very next moment, his sword snapped in 2. But Christopher didn't stop. He continued to push forward with powerful force and confidently declared, no need to worry, because the battle between us from start to finish is just a duel of honor between 2 nobles. He continued, I didn't like people from Elmheim to begin with, especially those who like to show off like you. Christopher had cruelly broken Aster's sword and attacked continuously, not giving him any breathing room. Aster was pushed into a passive state amidst countless overwhelming situations, but in the next moment, he quickly regained his composure. He grabbed the broken blade, channeled energy into it, and unexpectedly launched a powerful attack forward. Christopher easily raised his sword to block. In that moment of vulnerability, he suddenly discovered Aster had turned and ran away. Christopher shouted in astonishment, "You're actually running away?" "Wait!" Aster didn't stop, running while turning his head to say, "Our battle will be left for later. Right now I have someone else to deal with first." Christopher sneered and mocked, "So you were scared after all, you don't even deserve to be called a knight." Then, Christopher picked up the broken sword on the ground to examine it carefully and wondered, "What kind of sword is this? Even if it's a cheap sword, the quality is too poor." He realized something was unusual, paused for a moment, ran his hand through his hair, and whispered, "I see, this is Elmheim's trick. Are they playing dirty to ruin the fun?" At the same time, on the other side, Aster ran back to his territory and immediately shouted, "Smites, are you okay?" Before receiving an answer, a familiar voice rang out, "You arrived earlier than I expected, cousin." The person standing there was Gurion, the one behind the entire plan this time. He calmly said that everything that happened in this exam had been carefully arranged by him. Gurion continued, "He once bragged that he alone was enough, which made me somewhat look forward to him. How are things on your side? We just captured the third base, didn't we? For the time being, you could call this absolute dominance." But before he could finish, Aster cut him off. "Gurion, what have you done to my teammates?" His question made Gurion slightly annoyed. "Oh, that?" His teammates pointed their swords at him with hostility and said, "Don't blame me. I told you from the start I wouldn't follow you, didn't I? I'm not joining some fool who goes against Elmheim." Gurion laughed gleefully. "Ah, they didn't even bother to put up a fight. Even if they are just country bumpkins, they still have enough brains to understand which side they should be on." Aster calmly replied, "Do you really think you can beat me just by gathering enough numbers? No. You're dead wrong, little brother, I've already won." The victory condition for this capture the base challenge is to hold at least 2 bases when the exam ends. Even if you run yourself ragged trying to plant flags at other bases right now, you don't have enough people left to guard them. We just have to wait for you to leave for another base, then leisurely replace your flag with a red one, and it's over. We need at least 2 bases, as long as we hold that, we win. Aster gripped his sword tightly and threatened, "Then I will make it impossible for you to execute that plan, by cutting all of you down right here." The faces of the soldiers around him turned pale instantly, but Gurion laughed triumphantly, "Just an empty threat. That sword of yours is broken, isn't it? Even if you have 7 wings, without a weapon, you're just a bird with clipped wings. Or do you intend to fight all of us here alone?" Aster still smiled as he confidently drew his sword. Impressive. He tossed his sword behind him and continued, "You calculated everything much more thoroughly than I expected." Seeing this, Gurion laughed smugly, "I've already won." But contrary to his assumption, the moment the sword hit the ground, Aster narrowed his eyes, preparing to act. Everything now was in the palm of Gurion's hand. Aster just sighed softly. This situation was indeed quite troublesome. "You really have impressed me, Gurion." Witnessing that scene, Gurion immediately roared with delight, "We've won." But the very next second, as Aster's sword slipped from his hand and fell, he suddenly released an explosive burst of energy. His body hunched slightly, then he launched a counterattack with terrifying force. The blow was so powerful it sent Vigor flying far away, causing the sword in his hand to fly out as well. Seizing the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Aster nimbly grabbed that sword and launched an attack that devastated both front and back. With just a single strike, everyone present in that area collapsed in astonishment. Observing everything from high above, Juan could only scream in horror. "What?" Aster coldly pointed the tip of his sword directly at him. His voice was as sharp as ice. "But even so, you made a mistake by standing in front of me to interfere. Now you will pay the price." At this moment, Aster appeared in an incredibly cool and threatening stance. Gurion gritted his teeth, "This damn monster." Meanwhile, a massive amount of energy began to gather under Aster's feet. In the blink of an eye, he moved at impossible speed, closing the distance instantly. Aster soared through the air, diving straight at Gurion like an arrow piercing the wind. Gurion was startled, glancing behind him and exclaiming in disbelief, "No way, he flew here?" Aster looked straight into his eyes, coldly judging, "You're too slow. Now you can't escape anymore." The very next second, Aster launched a direct frontal attack. Gurion frantically used his sword to block, but the force behind Aster's strike was too overwhelming. His sword shattered into pieces upon impact. At that moment, Aster's mind drifted into a memory. I remember the first day I knew how to fly. Perhaps it wasn't because I couldn't do it before, but because now I could finally feel it. The omnipotent feeling of manipulating magic enclosing every distance. The omnipotent feeling of manipulating magic enclosing every distance. Urien intended to open his mouth to reply, but Aster cut him off. He grabbed him and pulled him hard downwards. But to me now, it feels so small. A faint smile appeared on his lips, and the next second, both plummeted straight to the ground. A massive explosion shook the entire area. Smoke billowed up, leaving those witnessing it completely shocked. Vigor stammered in desperation, "What kind of fight is this? What happened to the two of them?" Others standing nearby were equally stunned, unable to process what they had just witnessed with their own eyes. Through the thick dust, a figure gradually emerged, dragging someone along the ground. As that figure drew closer, everyone realized it was Aster. He was dragging Urien, who had now been completely defeated and had no will to resist left. Aster roughly tossed him onto the ground and muttered, "That actually hurt." Urien tried to speak. "What are you all doing? Just standing there looking like idiots? Hurry up and finish this guy off. That's an order from the Elmheim family." Urien tried to speak. "What are you all doing? Just standing there looking like idiots?" Aster looked at him calmly. "Are you that afraid of Elmheim's retaliation?" Vigor gripped his sword, his voice filled with resentment and bitterness. "Of course. My house is just a third-rate noble family, a family that could disappear in the blink of an eye if they really wanted to. They would crush us like nothing. So, for weak nobles like us to survive in this world, no matter how cowardly, we have no choice but to submit and avoid upsetting those above us." He shouted in desperation, "Someone who possesses everything like you will never understand our worries." Hearing those words, Aster just smiled. Seeing him smile like that, Vigor became even more furious. "What the hell are you laughing at?" Seeing him smile like that, Vigor became even more furious. "What the hell are you laughing at?" I have my own counter-arguments for that, but it is true that for now, I am the one with the privilege. That's why there are things only I can do. Aster raised his voice powerfully. "My enemy is Elmheim. If you can't do it, I will. I will change the arrogant and oppressive Elmheim of today. I will smash it and rebuild everything." These declarations left everyone around in stunned silence. They were completely shaken, unable to believe what they had just heard. They were completely shaken, unable to believe what they had just heard. "What the hell are you talking about?" Vigor asked back, trembling. "Do you understand what you're saying? Do you understand the true meaning of it?" Aster looked straight into his eyes, without hesitation. "Yes. This is a declaration of war." He continued in a firm but powerful voice. "No matter how obedient and devoted they are to the current arrogant Elmheim, what awaits them at the end of that path of loyalty is only betrayal and a miserable death. If they don't want that fate, then there is only one way left, to fight." Aster slightly shifted his stance, adding, "The 7 wings that I carry on my back, they are power created for that purpose. So now, you choose." His gaze swept over everyone present. "Which Elmheim will you follow? Him, or me?" Urien shouted angrily, "Stop spouting nonsense. There is no way that is allowed to happen. I will remember the faces and names of all of you. Whoever dares to betray me knows the consequences." Hearing those threats, Vigor began to panic. Sweat broke out on his face as fear and uncertainty invaded his mind. He couldn't decide which side was right for him and his family. The pressure of the choice weighed heavily on his shoulders. But then, as if having made up his mind, in just a moment, he suddenly threw his sword down and stepped in front of Aster. "You will actually defeat him, right? If you are just deceiving us and then nothing changes, I will be the one who despises you." At this moment, he was also holding the blue flag. Hearing that, Aster gave his promise without hesitation. And immediately, Vigor Smith raised the blue flag to the sky and declared clearly, "Vigor Smith, eldest son of the Smith house, I will support Aster Elmheim." The crowd buzzed. "No way, did he really say that?" Another added, "But with this, Durian's plan will completely shatter." The anger in Durian's eyes had now erupted into uncontrollable rage. He hissed, "That damn commoner." After all, Vigor stepped forward, his voice echoing throughout the area. "What are you all still standing there for? Now is our chance to show those arrogant Elmheim people what we're made of. Let's bet everything on the 7 wings." Those words sounded eloquent and inspiring. But instead of acting immediately, the others just looked at each other in confusion, unsure of what they should actually do next. The energy was there, but the direction was still missing. Observing everything taking place, Aster thought to himself, one down. At least now I don't have to go plant flags all by myself, but this is still not enough. I need more allies if I want to overthrow Elmheim. Not far away, Gurion sat in silence, a tense atmosphere enveloping them. Suddenly, someone approached him anxiously and asked, "Are you okay, Gurion?" But before that person could get close, Gurion roughly pushed him away and barked, "Don't touch me, you useless trash." His anger had reached its peak. In his head, thoughts burned, overthrow Elmheim? A lowly branch like you dares to? If I let him continue to act recklessly, I will have no face to show the main family. I am not like my brother, I cannot let this end here. Driven by that rage, Gurion began trying to activate the power of the four wings. But just then, a voice rang out from behind, casual but sharp, cutting through the atmosphere. "What's wrong?" "Elmheim, you look quite pathetic for someone I haven't seen in a long time." As Gurion hurriedly explained the situation to him, his frustration became even more apparent. "What the hell have you been doing all this time? Dealing with him was supposed to be your job, right?" But even while he was speaking, a dark and calculating thought flashed through Gurion's mind. Perfect. I still have him on my side. His wing badge might not be equal to the 7 wings, but when it comes to swordsmanship, he is definitely stronger than anyone here. With that thought, Gurion's confidence rose again. He commanded with authority, "Hurry up, mince that guy into pieces for me." But the very next second, something completely unexpected happened, something no one present could have imagined. Christopher suddenly stepped forward and smashed a red flag right into Gurion's face, before calmly saying, "I've come to return this." "Just as I thought, your methods go against my chivalry. In other words, I am breaking this alliance." Those words were more painful than any blade. Gurion was stunned, collapsing to the ground, unable to process what had just happened. Around him, surprised whispers spread. "Are you kidding me? Even the Nolan family is betraying us?" Another worried, "I don't even know who to side with anymore." The situation fell into complete chaos. Alliances shattered, trust collapsed. Amidst that mess, Christopher calmly drew his sword. The cold sound cut through the tension as he spoke with confidence. "Well, it looks like we're back to square one. You didn't really think you could pass this exam without settling things with me, Aster?" Christopher continued with pride in his posture. "The proud swordsmanship of the Nolan family, against your 7 wings. The proud swordsmanship of the Nolan family, against your 7 wings." Their eyes locked and then, in an instant, the battle began. Christopher struck first, lunging forward with incredible speed. His blade tore through the air. "Let's make it clear who the elite one really is." With a firm voice, Aster replied, "No, that will have to wait." The very next second, he moved, launching his own attack, aimed straight at Christopher. Christopher immediately noticed the difference as their blades clashed. His sharp eyes analyzed Aster's movements and thought to himself, "This person is completely different from before." At that moment, his sword was pressed down into the ground. Aster's strike landed heavily, leaving a deep mark along the blade. Quickly regaining his balance, Christopher looked up and said, "Did you forget? Only one team can pass this exam. If both of us aim to become Kingdom Knights, then we have no choice but to settle it right here." Aster's expression didn't waver. Instead, he calmly replied, "That would be a problem for me, Nolan." For a brief moment, the tension shifted. And then Aster said something no one expected. "I want you to become a Kingdom Knight too." Christopher blinked in surprise. "What?" Aster lowered his stance and began to explain, "You've gotten everyone excited about overthrowing Elmheim, so it wouldn't be good if I asked you to give up on your dream just because we belong to different teams, right?" He paused for a moment to let his words sink in, then added, "I have a plan to ensure everyone here passes." This time, not only Christopher was shocked, Gurion was equally stunned. Murmurs began to spread in the group. Vigor was the first to speak. "Everyone? There's no way you can do that." Aster slowly lowered his sword. "I can't guarantee it for sure, but I'm confident. But I need everyone's cooperation to do it." Having said that, Aster walked straight toward Gurion. Seeing him approach, Gurion instinctively braced himself, fear evident in his eyes. But instead of attacking, Aster simply reached his hand toward him and said calmly, "So, the first thing to do is, let's make peace, Gurion." And then, the scene changed completely. Now, all the flags could be seen gathered together. When the examiner arrived and saw that, his reaction was extremely intense. "What is this? Do you not even know how to plant a flag?" Amidst the tension, Aster stepped up and replied in a calm voice, "The victory condition is to occupy 2 or more camps." But since we were never told that only one team is allowed to plant a flag at a single camp, we decided to form an alliance between the 3 teams and occupy all the camps together. His explanation was clear and logical, but it wasn't something the examiner was willing to accept easily. On the contrary, his anger only increased. So you want me to let all of you pass? Are you making a joke out of this exam? Standing nearby, Vigor could feel the tension tightening around them. His whole body stiffened as he muttered, I knew it wouldn't work. Beside him, Gurion also shook his head, of course it won't. There's no way that kind of twisted logic can pass. Standing nearby, Vigor could feel the tension tightening around them. His whole body stiffened as he muttered, I knew it wouldn't work. Beside him, Gurion also shook his head, of course it won't. There's no way that kind of twisted logic can pass. Aster looked straight into the examiner's eyes, without hesitation. What if that enemy is worth more alive than dead? The answer seemed only to make the examiner more furious. He declared firmly, a knight is the sword of the nation. Judging it is not your duty, Aster. But Aster didn't back down. Instead, he stepped forward slightly and said, so you intend to strip us of our right to compete? But since we haven't violated any rules, wouldn't that decision be your personal ego overstepping the boundaries of an examiner? Those words carried a different weight. For a moment, even the examiner was taken aback, unable to respond immediately. Aster didn't stop there. He moved closer and said in a quiet but calculating voice, moreover, if everyone fails this way, I wonder if the main family would really let this slide. That sentence changed everything. The tension in the air shifted into hesitation. Immediately after, the entire scene shifted to another area. Now, everyone was gathering in another place waiting. Vigor sat in front of Aster, clearly fidgety, and so the great examiner went to check with his superiors, and we've been waiting here for a whole hour. Are we really going to be okay? Don't tell me we're all actually going to fail. Aster, while still appearing unusually relaxed, replied in a gentle tone, who knows? At least we've shown them that this is worth discussing. Not far away, others were loitering around Gurion, still unsure about everything that had happened. Lowering his voice, Vigor added, even so, I'm surprised that rich boy actually agreed to cooperate. What exactly did you say to him? Aster just shrugged, waving it off, nothing much. Just then, a loud voice rang out, drawing attention. Immediately, everyone's focus turned forward. Smith yelled, shattering the silence. What are you idiots just standing there for? This is our chance to show those arrogant Elmheim bastards who they're dealing with. Place your bets on the 7 leaves. The desperate call to arms left the other candidates wavering. They exchanged stunned looks, caught off guard by this sudden shift. Watching the scene unfold, Aster gave a slight smirk and whispered to himself, so, someone's finally kicked things off. At least I don't have to plant the flag myself. I can finally breathe a sigh of relief now that I've hooked this big fish. However, his eyes remained heavy with thought. But this still isn't enough. I need more allies to completely topple the Elmheim house. On the other side, Gurion was kneeling in the dirt, consumed by humiliation. When one of his underlings nervously ran over to ask, Lord Gurion, are you alright? Gurion immediately shoved him away and roared, don't touch me, you useless trash. The surge of fury twisted Gurion's face into a terrifying mask of rage. He gritted his teeth in resentment. You say you want to topple the Elmheim house? If I let these bottom-feeding nobodies from the branch family run wild like this, I won't have the face to show myself before the main family ever again. He stared at his blood-stained hands, nursing a crazed thirst for revenge. I'm not like my brother, I can't let it end like this. Just then, a cold voice rang out. What's going on here? Elmheim. It's only been a short while, but you look absolutely pathetic, don't you? Gurion looked up in shock, realizing Nolan was standing tall right in front of him. Grasping at straws, he shrieked in frustration. What the hell have you been doing this whole time? Wasn't dealing with him your job? Is it just excuses after suffering a crushing defeat? Did he manage to find a shield for himself? Watching Nolan's sturdy back, Gurion felt a surge of triumph. That's right, we've still got this guy on our side. Even if his crest isn't the 7 leaves, when it comes to swordsmanship, he's definitely the strongest one here. He pointed a frantic finger at Aster and ordered, hurry up and cut that guy down for me. But Nolan maintained a blank expression and calmly replied, I'm here to return this. He coldly declared his ties to the coward severed. As I thought, your methods go against my knightly code. Consider our alliance finished as of now. Nolan turned his back and walked away decisively, leaving Gurion frozen in utter disbelief. This sudden U-turn by the Nolan house sent the remaining candidates into a state of absolute confusion. They were lost on the battlefield, unsure of who to trust or follow. Nolan walked coolly toward Aster, flatly stating that there was no room for cowardice in this exam. "Don't tell me you actually thought you could pass this exam without settling things with me, do you?" He wanted to use the proud swordsmanship of the Nolan house to test his true strength against Aster's Seven Leaves power. "This guy's tough, but whether I can actually beat him is a different story." Nolan channeled all of his magical power into his sword, creating a brilliant golden light before rushing in to attack with terrifying speed. He roared with determination, "Let's settle this right now and see who's truly stronger." Contrary to that rush, Aster just gave a mysterious smirk and replied, "No, let's leave that for later." Instantly, a burst of crimson magic flared up, and Aster easily blocked Nolan's thunderous strike, creating a powerful shockwave. Nolan was shocked to realize that the Aster in front of him was completely different from the one he had faced moments ago. The pressure was suffocating. Nolan wouldn't accept a delay. He reminded everyone of the Academy's brutal rule: only one team was allowed to pass this exam. He shouted, demanding an immediate fair duel to determine who was worthy of becoming a royal knight. Aster calmly closed his eyes, admitting that it would be a major problem for him if he had to eliminate such a talented person. He left Nolan stunned when he clearly declared, "Nolan, I want you to become a royal knight, too." Aster explained that after rallying everyone to defeat the Elmheim house, having allies drop out just because they were on different teams was a terrible outcome. With a smile full of confidence and calculation, Aster firmly asserted, "I have a plan to make sure everyone here passes." Nolan and the other candidates were dumbstruck, unable to believe their ears at the insane idea just uttered. Standing amidst the ruins, Aster claimed he wasn't entirely certain, but he was fairly confident as long as everyone was willing to cooperate. He looked down at the pathetically kneeling Gurion, beginning the first step to turning the tide. Aster extended a hand toward the person who had just tried to kill him and said coolly, "Let's make peace, Gurion." Soon after, a scene never before seen occurred at the base. 3 ribbons representing the blue, red, and yellow teams were tied tightly together and fluttering atop the tower. Witnessing this freak occurrence, the examiner screamed in rage, claiming that these candidates didn't even know how to plant a flag according to the regulations. Aster calmly explained that the rules only required capturing 2 or more bases, but there was never a rule forbidding multiple teams from planting flags at the same base. Therefore, all 3 teams had decided to form an alliance to hold all the bases together. The examiner turned purple with rage, shouting that Aster was making a mockery of the exam and demanding to know if he intended to shake hands with the enemy instead of destroying them in the spirit of knighthood. He roared about the knightly ideal of being the nation's sword and threatened to fail all the candidates there for this ridiculous stunt. Unfazed, Aster retorted by asking if he intended to abuse his power to fail people who hadn't violated any rules. He stepped closer and whispered a heavy warning into the examiner's ear. "If everyone has failed this way, do you think the main Elmheim family will sit idly by when they see their own people being eliminated so unfairly?" The threat hit home, leaving the examiner speechless in his utter fury. The group was taken to a closed room and left to wait for a tense hour. Smith paced anxiously, afraid that they would all be failed for nothing after such a wild stunt. Contrary to his teammates' unease, Aster remained calm. He reasoned that at the very least, this action had shown them that the matter was worth discussing. Seeing that Gurion had finally agreed to cooperate, Smith curiously asked what Aster had said to break the arrogant young master, but he only received a mysterious smile in return. Suddenly, the large doors swung open. A knight clearly demanded everyone's attention because Principal Mimir was about to announce the exam results. An older man with an imposing presence walked in, demanding that everyone listen carefully to what he was about to say. Observing the middle-aged man approaching, a young man silently wondered, "Is that the principal?" Looking at his somewhat plain appearance, Aster commented nonchalantly, "He looks just like any other old geezer, doesn't he?" His disrespectful remark was immediately met with a reprimand from someone nearby for being too rude. Mimir stopped walking, looked straight at Aster, and asked, "You're Aster, right?" He admitted that it was because of his actions that the council had to make an incredibly difficult decision. Accepting so many candidates at once like this was completely unprecedented. Mimir revealed that there had initially been a proposal to hold a re-examination, but thanks to the support of other directors, the Academy had finally decided to accept Aster's argument. Before the young man's skeptical eyes, Mimir unexpectedly beamed a bright smile and clearly announced, you all have been accepted." The room immediately erupted into cheers of joy. Smith and the other candidates couldn't hide their happiness upon learning they had officially become students. Mimir reminded everyone to continue putting in more effort to prove that the Academy's decision today was not a mistake. He formally sent his congratulations and warmly welcomed all the recruits to the Dorisil Kingdom Night Academy. A cheer of relief echoed through the night, marking the beginning of Aster's journey in this place. Having passed the entrance exam, Aster and the other candidates enjoyed some rare relaxation in the Academy's massive hot spring. Smith soaked in the water and happily shouted, "This is the life. The food is great, the bath is huge. It's all thanks to Sir Aster." The other candidates joined in enthusiastically, even declaring they would follow Boss Aster for the rest of their lives. Aster just quietly enjoyed the warm water, thinking to himself that the most important thing was that they had dared to stand up against the Elmheim people and had officially become knight candidates. He believed that this momentum would sooner or later become a great tidal wave that would topple the entire Elmheim family, and this was the starting point for his rebellion. Aster didn't forget to think about his sister, Alphen, someone who had enrolled a year prior and would surely be a powerful ally to help him understand the ins and outs of this place before official training began tomorrow. Just as he was about to stand up to prepare for his new life at the academy, Aster suddenly felt something unusual right behind his back. He turned around in shock and screamed in alarm when he saw the crowd of candidates gathered closely, staring at the mark on his back with worshipful eyes. "Hey, what the hell are you guys doing?" It turned out these people believed that a living seven-leaf mark was an extremely potent good luck charm, so they were trying to crowd around to get a blessing. Ignoring Aster's anger and resistance, the candidates still sincerely clasped their hands and knelt to pray, asking for divine protection. Aster could only roar in frustration at the ridiculous behavior of his new teammates, insisting that the good luck they expected would never happen. In another secluded corner of the castle, a mysterious woman stood on a balcony, coldly expressing her disappointment to Gurion, who was kneeling at her feet. She mocked him, saying that instead of defeating the seven-leaf brat, he had let himself be conquered and had returned empty-handed in a pathetic manner. Helen glared down at the kneeling Gurion. She growled with indignation, "I heard you even let him declare that he would crush the Elmheim house. Do you just stand there and watch after suffering such humiliation?" Gurion trembled in fear. "I'm sorry, Mother. I will definitely make up for this mistake. Next time, I will meet your expectations." But a heavy kick cut his words short. Lillian coldly declared, "There will be no next time for trash like you." She continued with bitter insults, "A useless, filthy thing like you should be butchered along with the waste at the slaughterhouse and fed to the magical beasts." Just then, Lillian appeared, casually stepping on the person who was gasping for air and adding, "Just like that weakling Darius." Gurion groaned in pain, trying to cling to a last shred of hope. "Ugh, please, anything but that, sister." But all he got in return were merciless kicks from his own blood sister. Lying flat on the ground with a blood-covered face, Gurion gritted his teeth in desperate hatred. "Damn it, it's all his fault, it's all because of him." He blamed everything on Aster, the one who had pushed him into this tragic situation. Suddenly, Aster's calculated offer during the exam appeared in his mind: "Let's cooperate. It would be terrible if you went back empty-handed like this, wouldn't it?" Before Gurion's bewildered expression, Aster had mocked the prospect of him having to report to the family that he had been played by a piece of garbage from the Branch family and failed the exam. He leaned close to his ear, his eyes glowing with intimidation. "Try to imagine if word of that reached the great elder of the main house. You'd definitely be killed, right?" Looking at Gurion's pale face in horror, he continued to rub salt into his extreme fear. "I've already seen how Darius ended up. It was pathetic. That is not how a human being should die." Aster firmly grabbed Gurion's collar, forcing him to face the brutal reality waiting ahead. He coldly sowed seeds of fear into Gurion's mind. "You don't want to end up like that, do you? All you need to do is stay silent and ignore what I'm doing. If you do that, I will save you." Returning to the present, Lillian was still raining violent kicks on Gurion until a voice spoke up to stop her. "Leave him be, Lillian. That's enough." The person who spoke was Julius Elmheim. He sat there nonchalantly and mocked, "Your cute little brother is crying and apologizing. Isn't that right?" Gurion could only sob in pain at this moment. "Ugh, brother." Julius wore an arrogant smile. His hand squeezed Alphen's head, who was being restrained with an iron mask, then he continued with hypocritical words, "We are a family connected by blood. Families should live in harmony, right?" The image of the absolute domination of the Elmheim house, which had long been used to suppress knights, had begun to shake violently since the arrival of the seven colored ones. Standing before the symbol of the family's authority, Lady Helen turned around coldly, her eyes burning with a cruel glint. She firmly ordered her 2 children, so, you too must remind them. Lillian gave a twisted, bloodthirsty smile, her purple eyes glowing with excitement. We are not just ornaments. Continuing her sister's thought, Julius also revealed a sinister smile along with blood-red eyes full of killing intent. He clearly declared his brutal goal: show them what true violence looks like. You are prestigious kingdom knights, or rather, the candidates chosen for that role. Amidst the training ground with its towering pillars, a series of candidates were training frantically, seeking a chance to change their lives. A true kingdom knight is an elite who overwhelms everyone else in combat, tactics, and every other field. Naturally, if you crave to join their ranks, you yourselves must prove that you are special. But there is only one special slot. So, hang in there, brothers. Smith roared with spirit, but as soon as his sword touched the pillar, it shattered into pieces, leaving him stunned. Damn it. To classify talent, the Academy divides candidates into 6 ranks, corresponding to the curriculum suited to the actual strength of each person. Stronger individuals will have the opportunity to access more advanced and higher-class techniques. If you only know how to swing a sword, you are only third-rate. If you can control magical power, you are considered second-rate. Only when mastering both swordsmanship and magic simultaneously do candidates officially step into the first-rate ranks. A wave of crimson killing intent covered the space, accompanied by a firm declaration: I have nothing to teach the stupid, mediocre bottom feeders below the 3rd rank. If you want to learn first-rate techniques, become stronger. Continuing to prove your own strength is the greatest freedom you are allowed here. With a shocking thud, the inspector turned his head in a panic. Aster stood tall with the sword in his hand. The pattern he had just cut into the pillar was as smooth as slicing through a banana. The candidates behind him could only sigh in despair. How are we supposed to do something like that? From the high balcony, the academy directors observed the young man in awe. They silently wondered if that was the legendary 7 Wings with such extraordinary talent. Destroying a magical iron pillar, a material as sturdy as a golem, with such ease confirmed that Aster was truly someone special. However, the potential hidden within the 7 pairs of wings didn't stop there. A director pondered that if Aster was soon satisfied with himself, he would surely be swallowed by the dragon hiding within. That was Julius Elmheim, the one sitting arrogantly with a sinister smile, ready to crush anyone in his way with his brutal strength. Standing by the hallway window, Smith sighed as he looked at the score ranking. Although they had passed the rigorous entrance exam, they were still experiencing the grueling trial phase of a true meritocratic regime. Looking at the card in his hand, Smith frowned, realizing that among the recruits, only Aster and Nolan were the only ones who didn't start from the lowly 6th rank. The gap in class was immediately obvious when they were placed in the 4th rank, while others were still struggling far behind. Aster held the 4th rank card in his hand, gave a bright smile, and reminded his teammates that to become a kingdom knight, one had to at least reach the 2nd rank or higher. He urged Smith to catch up with him quickly if he didn't want to get into big trouble. Smith complained about his boss's strictness, leaving Aster asking back in confusion. Smith seriously repeated Aster's declaration of war about crushing the Elmheim house, something that had sparked hope for many people about a real change to the current reality. He excitedly put his arm around Aster's shoulder and clearly declared, "So let us support you. Boss, let's topple Elmheim together. Now you've got some status in the academy too, boss." He. Aster resolved to become even stronger to achieve his only goal, to crush the Elmheim house. A hungry stomach suddenly pulled him back to reality. Smith pulled his arm, looking for food. First, we have to fill our stomachs. I can't stand the afternoon training session with an empty stomach. Just as they stepped into the hall, they were surprised to see a crowd of recruits gathered, full of unease. Aster wondered, what's going on? Why is everyone standing here? Seeing Aster appear, the recruits panicked and cried out, Aster, there you are. There's big trouble, man. The Elmheim people are here. A strange, mocking voice rang out from within. Oh, so you're Aster, huh? A young man was casually chewing bread, looking at Aster with a challenging gaze. Since you came too slowly, I started enjoying this stuff first. Aster was stunned when he realized Julius and Lillian were sitting arrogantly in front, while Julius was nonchalantly stomping on a poor guy lying flat on the ground. Smith asked in shock, siblings? So that means that guy is also from the main family? Aster confirmed in a low voice, yes, they're very good at breeding, numerous as ants. That's Julius Elmheim, the 2nd son and 2nd in line for succession of the main family, along with his sister, Lillian. This tyrannical pair was famous for being the most brutal and cruel in the entire Elmheim house. Everywhere they went, they left only destruction in their wake. They were ready to crush anyone in their path with merciless cruelty, sowing terror for anyone who dared to oppose them. Aster silently noted that he had forgotten the presence of these two dangerous people at the academy. Lillian looked at Aster with eyes full of interest. "Humph, you have a pretty cute face." She casually stepped over the body groaning on the ground and mocked, "Different from the stupid, ugly, and boring little brother lying here." Seeing the strange iron mask on the defeated person's face, Smith asked in terror, "What is that tasteless mask?" Aster explained coldly, "That's an iron chain, a disciplinary tool of the Elmheim house used to punish those who fall behind." In his previous life, he himself had been a victim of their torture. Julius smirked. He stomped hard on Gurian's head and insulted him. Despite carrying the Elmheim name, he was placed in the lowly 6th rank during today's assessment. Julius looked at his little brother groaning under his feet, curling his lip in contempt. "Pathetic, isn't it?" He wore a grotesque smile and asserted that this iron mask was a gift from a kind brother to help Gurian have more motivation to try harder. Looking at the long line of students wearing that terrifying disciplinary tool, Julius casually revealed his cruelty. "If food, water, and fresh air are rewards, then no matter who it is, they will work until they die. Because if they can't take it off, they will die." Witnessing the horrific scene, Smith shivered in fear. "Ugh, what the hell is happening here? All of them are wearing that thing." Julius smugly pointed to those being shackled, claiming that their eyes, sharp like hungry beasts, were proof of the mask's effectiveness. He casually requested the recruits to greet these seniors properly. Suddenly, Julius turned to a figure standing behind and urged, "Come on, you two, don't be shy, let everyone see your face." He smiled cynicidally as a red-haired girl stepped forward. "It's been a long time since you two reunited, right?" Aster went numb. His pupils contracted when he realized the person standing in front of him was his own sister wearing a cold iron mask. Julius asked gleefully, "How about it? Your sister has changed quite a lot, hasn't she?" Aster screamed frantically in pain. "Sister Alphen. Oh my god, even his sister he snatched here to play his sick games." Looking at Alphen trembling with eyes full of resentment behind the iron mask, the fire of anger in Aster flared up more intensely than ever before. His hand tightened on the sword hilt with immense killing intent. Aster roared in absolute rage, "You Julius, you bastard, what have you done to her?" Before that rage, Julius still nonchalantly tossed another iron mask to the floor. The dry clinking of metal echoed defiantly. Julius smiled faintly, feigning calmness. "Calm down." He casually announced that he had prepared enough masks for all the newcomers, not missing a single one. Looking at the pile of iron masks lying under his feet, Julius stood arrogantly, stomping on Gurian's body and spreading his arms wide. He wore a twisted, excited smile and clearly declared, "Let's enjoy a fun welcome party together." Julius yelled, ordering his henchmen, "Come on, you bastards, focus your minds on teasing them. These guys are your juniors in the guidance team." He smiled crazily, declaring that if they wanted a decent dinner, they had to force all these recruits to wear the masks. Immediately, the masked seniors rushed in to attack. Aster realized the situation was extremely dire when their eyes were completely blank and devoid of reason. With the skills of students at least at the 4th rank, this sudden wave of attacks left Smith surprised by the Elmheim house's premature action in a battle that was completely unbalanced in numbers. They had hit him with a preemptive strike. Witnessing his teammates falling one by one, Smith screamed in panic, "What should we do, boss? At this rate, everyone will be turned into masked henchmen." Before the life-or-death situation, Aster decisively swung a bright red sword arc, creating an explosion of magical power, blowing away all the seniors closing in an instant. Groans of pain echoed as the masked people were sent flying, revealing Aster's killing intent eyes staring straight at the mastermind. Smith couldn't help but be shocked by the terrifying pressure that Aster was radiating right then. Aster took a step forward, looking straight at the leader, and growled, "Cousin Julius, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Julius nonchalantly replied in a mocking tone, telling Aster not to be so harsh because he considered this an act of kindness on his part. He contemptuously called the recruits following Aster scum, those who only knew how to cling to others to pass the exam and were delusional about their candidate status. Sitting arrogantly on a high chair next to Lillian, Julius declared that if the quality of those at the bottom was too low, then even those at the peak like him would be looked down upon. As the leader, he affirmed that he could not allow this half-heartedness to exist and decided to personally take care of everyone in the Elmheim style. Holding an iron mask in his hand with a twisted, cruel smile, Julius stomped his foot hard on the head of a student groaning on the ground. Faced with those arrogant words, Aster just coldly replied that he hadn't asked or cared about anything he had just said. Aster roared in fury, demanding that Julius immediately remove that disgusting thing from his sister's mouth. He channeled red magical power into his sword, rushing to attack Julius. But unexpectedly, he was blocked by Alphen herself. Seeing his sister protecting the enemy, Aster was shocked and couldn't believe his eyes. Alphen looked at her younger brother with cold, blank eyes behind the iron mask. Julius stood behind her nonchalantly, mocking Aster for not getting angry at him because Alphen was by his side completely of her own free will. He challenged Aster to ask his sister himself. While Lillian enjoyed laughing at her brother's cruelty, Aster painfully realized why his mother had been so worried for so long without receiving any news from Alphen. It turned out she had to endure this tragic scene all along. He was determined to save her from their manipulation, shouting that she didn't have to listen to them anymore. But in return for his good intentions, he received a brutal slash from Alphen. In the moment Aster hesitated, Nolan suddenly lunged forward, shouting and asking him what on earth he was waiting for. He declared that if Aster couldn't bring himself to do it, he would be the one to finish off that bastard Julius. However, Julius was on an entirely different level, catching the blade with his bare hands. A voice full of contemptuous mockery rang out. So, being a hard worker who practices swordsmanship more than others is what you consider a great knight? Nolan was shocked to realize the terrifying pressure coming from him. The surge of fire magic surrounding Julius left Nolan gasping from the heat. Julius laughed arrogantly. He clearly stated his philosophy of the strongest is the one who matters most. Immediately, he unleashed a lightning-fast kick that sent Nolan flying away, where he collapsed in pain. Seeing his teammate in danger, Smith rushed over in a panic. "Hey, are you all right?" Julius watched that pathetic scene with a look of satisfaction. He admitted he loved trampling on the self-respect and dignity of those who always acted so noble like them. Lillian casually walked over, holding an iron mask. She wore a twisted smile, deciding she would turn Nolan into her own special pet. She dismissively brushed off Smith's existence, stating coldly, "Weakness is a sin, you know?" Julius responded gleefully, asserting that only the strong have the privilege to speak. Meanwhile, the surrounding scene became chaotic as other students were forced to wear iron masks amidst desperate screams. "Help me! Stop it!" Julius glared at Aster, challenging him regarding where his future would go when everything was gradually being swallowed by the stronger. Aster didn't say a word, his eyes glowing with a deathly gaze. Julius still smirked, challenging him. "What's the matter, brother?" Aster immediately roared and lunged forward like a crimson whirlwind. An earth-shattering magical collision erupted as Aster poured his full strength into his swing. Yet, it couldn't pierce through his mana shield. Even though he tried to put everything he had into it, it was no use. He quickly grabbed Aster by the throat. The terrifying heat caused Aster immense pain. Witnessing his boss's rage, Smith could only shout Aster's name in panicked astonishment. Yet Julius maintained his arrogant expression and scoffed. "Is this all the 7 wings can do? How disappointing. I thought you'd be more useful than this." He reminded him that Aster had only managed to block one of his attacks and shouldn't get too complacent. In response, Aster's eyes blazed amidst the fury. He suddenly spun, creating a powerful, glowing red vortex of magic. Julius was shocked to notice something unusual as his own magical flow was being caught and twisted at his opponent's will. The compressed magical energy erupted powerfully, blowing Julius away and shattering even the solid stone walls into 100 pieces. Amidst the ruins, Aster sheathed his sword with poise and replied coldly, "Did you just say something ridiculous?" "Sorry, I wasn't listening. Now everyone is probably done with your nonsense, right? You've been like a buzzing hornet this whole time." He walked up to his defeated foe, his sword still radiating a threatening killing intent. Standing before the pathetically lying Julius, Aster lowered his voice and challenged him. "Why don't you try repeating what you just said?" Aster looked straight into his opponent's eyes with his glowing gaze and asked back, "Is that what you said?" Looking at the devastated ruins, those who witnessed it were stunned and exclaimed in surprise. Did that bastard actually pull it off? Amidst the ruin scene, Aster stood silently. Aster's gaze didn't waver in the slightest. Julius scrambled to get up, grumbling uncomfortably while brushing off the dust. "Ugh, that really hurt. You actually blew me quite a distance, didn't you?" He looked at Aster with a contemptuous expression. "This kid doesn't even know fear and dares to challenge me. What do you think will happen if you dare to scratch this precious mark of mine?" Witnessing the sight of Julius still being able to stand firm after that destructive attack, Smith trembled, unable to believe his eyes. "Huh? He's completely unscathed?" Contrary to the crowd's fear, Lillian appeared extremely excited. "Prepare for a good show. My brother is heated up now." She didn't hesitate to mock her brother bitterly. "You're pathetic. You talked big just to get countered like this?" Julius kept his smug look, casually responding to his sister's teasing. Hey, don't say such hurtful things, Lillian. Even a guy like me can get hurt, you know? He stared silently at the shattered sword beneath his feet, his killing intent rising again with a cold threat aimed straight at Aster. You have a lot of nerve to do that. Julius roared in fury after having his ego bruised. Aster, you dare call me trash? He radiated a wave of magic so hot it felt like it wanted to burn everything around. Watching Aster stand calmly, Julius gritted his teeth and mocked, "You're really becoming too arrogant, just because I played along with your little family game." He hissed a threat, "I hope you're ready to feel death." Julius shouted and went crazy, lunging to attack. Yet Aster maintained his calm demeanor. He swung his glowing red sword and replied coldly, "Oh, is that so? Let's cut the long-winded threats. If you're going to come, then just bring it. Let's cut the long-winded threats. If you're going to come, then just bring it." Julius poured his full strength into a slash carrying a massive flame, determined to crush his opponent. Aster quickly dodged, his eyes still calmly observing every move of the enemy. Just as both were about to deliver the finishing blow, a powerful voice suddenly intervened. "No, that's enough, you two." Aster was startled to recognize a familiar presence. This voice. Count Maze. Count Maze appeared with an elegant look and a leisurely smile on his lips. He looked at the surrounding ruins and sighed softly. "What do you think the cafeteria is for, anyway? It's such a headache when you keep causing trouble like this. Good grief, you've actually turned this place into a battlefield." Count Maze walked up casually. He couldn't just stand by and watch this ruin any longer. Julius roared in anger, demanding Maze not stick his nose into this. He contemptuously called him nothing but a lackey of the sixth-generation family head, with no right to interfere in his business. Maze maintained his leisurely smile, advising Julius to restrain himself. He mocked that a first-rate student and a top candidate for leadership making a scene with someone considered lower rank was truly disgraceful. To defuse the situation, Maze approached Aster, gently asking him to show him the courtesy of sheathing his sword. Julius scoffed, his eyes filled with unwillingness to let it go as he looked toward Maze. He growled that Maze had no idea how much trouble he was causing, but ultimately decided to let it slide this time. Julius decisively swung his sword, ordering his henchmen to withdraw, declaring the welcome party over. Witnessing his enemy about to leave while Alphen's situation remained unresolved, Aster started to lunge forward and shouted, "Wait, I'm not finished with you yet." But Maze moved quickly, closing in and holding Aster firm, immediately stopping his reckless action. Count Maze squeezed Aster's shoulder, advising him in a soft voice, "I'm sorry, but I would appreciate it if you could grant me the favor this time." Although his heart boiled with resentment, Aster could only stand rooted to the spot, helplessly watching Alphen's back as she walked away behind the tyrant Julius. Deep down, he screamed in agony, "Sister!" Alphen glanced back slightly, her eyes dim behind the iron mask as if containing 1,000 things she wanted to say but couldn't utter. Aster stood still, watching her leave, his heart feeling as if it were being crushed to see his sister completely manipulated by the enemy's shackles. Beneath his feet, the cold iron mask lay abandoned on the ground like a testament to the humiliation his sister was enduring. "Aster! Sister Alphen!" He silently called her name in utter, choked-up despair. The scene shifts to an office, where Viscount HF is pounding his desk in rage. Damn it! Witnessing the arrogance of the main family right at the academy, even someone as experienced as him couldn't hide his helplessness and outrage. Smith couldn't help but tremble when recalling the horrific scene that just occurred, that Julius is truly a monster. Nolan, the genius of the Nolan house, was now lying in a coma with white bandages covering his body after his crushing defeat. Not only that, but many other teammates had also been mocked by Lillian and dragged away in those grotesque masks. Looking at Aster, who was clutching the iron mask in his hand with eyes blazing with killing intent, Smith asked worriedly, "What are we going to do next?" The boss stood tall, his hand gripping the cold iron mask, his gaze locked onto the man sitting leisurely in front of him. He growled his questioning, filled with dissatisfaction, "You should have stopped them, Count Maze?" The silence in the room was broken by the angry shouting of the female assistant standing behind. "Hey, you, show some respect to the Count, who just stepped in to mediate for you." Yet Maze just raised his hand to signal calm, a polite smile still present on his lips. It's fine. This boy and I are old acquaintances, aren't we?" Aster looked at Maze's unruffled face. Memories of 4 years ago, when Aster was summoned to the Elmheim main family, flooded back. At that time, amid the suffocating pressure from the great elders, Maze was the only noble from the Elmheim Knight faction who stood up to protect him. Even though he had once saved his life, until now, Aster still couldn't understand whether this man was an ally or an enemy. Not waiting for Maze to react, Smith, sitting beside him, also exploded with frustration. He screamed in desperation, "I don't care if they are Elmheim family members or not. But how can you just stand by and watch that tyranny happen right in front of your eyes like that? In response to that outrage was only an enigmatic smirk from Maze. He casually asserted that he was also a high-ranking official of the Elmheim family, so unless there was a truly serious problem, he would never go and question the actions of the heads of the family. Aster held up the iron mask, his eyes blazing with furious questioning. Is forcing others to wear masks to control them not a big deal to you? Maze still leaned back in his chair nonchalantly, coldly asserting that this academy was built to train knights under a meritocratic regime. He believed that no matter how cruel the methods, as long as it helped the candidates advance, he had no reason to oppose it. Maze even gave an ironic example that the students under Julius's command were seeing their scores increase rapidly. Under the indulgence of even the principal, the candidates wearing iron masks with soulless red eyes were gradually being turned into true fighting machines. Aster bitterly realized he couldn't count on anyone in this rotting place. Seeing Aster about to leave, Maze saw through his heart and offered a warning. You aren't planning on heading straight into enemy territory to bring them back, are you? I wouldn't encourage that. Maze's gaze locked onto Aster, reminding him that every move he made was being closely watched by the main family. With just one wrong step, they could kick him out of the academy whenever they wanted. Yet Aster stepped out decisively. He coldly asserted that that threat wasn't a reason for him to abandon his teammates. Looking at the iron mask in his hand, Aster silently thought to himself that his actions weren't merely for the sake of justice. He understood clearly that iron shackles gnaw at and rot the human soul, stripping away freedom, free speech, and the minimum dignity of a warrior. And finally, it would completely eliminate any will to resist, turning everyone into slaves who only knew how to obey their masters like soulless machines, turning people into submissive and convenient tools. That is the true terror of those shackles. Looking at Aster's hardened expression, Maze squinted skeptically. You speak of it as if you've seen it happen with your own eyes before. Aster just curled his lip, his eyes showing a dark look as he replied, I just happened to learn the fate of those for whom everything was already too late. I don't want my friends to end up like that. Aster's firm statement left both Smith and Maze silent and thoughtful. Maze looked deep into the teenager's eyes, a suspicion rising within him. Could it be that he meant? Seeing the atmosphere become too heavy, Aster changed his tone to reassure the other party. Well, don't worry too much. I'm not that eager to get expelled either. If I can resolve this smoothly, that would be even better. Aster stood up decisively, preparing to leave the office. Seeing that confident look, Maze asked curiously, Oh, so you really have a plan already? Aster didn't look back. He raised the iron mask he was holding and answered coldly, By now, surely you must already know, right? That is my own way of fighting. Aster firmly grabbed the iron mask. 3 days after the cafeteria riot, the atmosphere at the academy became more suffocating than ever. The interns were running frantically, sweating profusely, their faces showing exhaustion under the invisible pressure weighing down on them. Witnessing Nolan still stubbornly going to the training ground with a bandaged face, Smith couldn't help but ask worriedly, Hey Nolan, are you sure you're still okay to train with those wounds? Nolan brushed it off decisively, his eyes still determined despite his body still being in pain. Now is not the time to rest. The 4th rank curriculum is about to start, and besides, these wounds are nothing but scratches. Smith could only sigh at his teammate's stubbornness. You're as stubborn as ever. But Smith's gaze quickly shifted to shock as he looked ahead. But the person we should really be worried about is him. He followed Aster's back and questioned himself in total terror. What on earth is he thinking in that head of his? Because right now, Aster was walking proudly with the very iron mask, the slave shackles of the Elmheim house, locked tightly onto his face. Just a few days ago, Aster had trudged straight into enemy territory in a tight black outfit. Witnessing this appearance, Julius was lounging on a sofa, holding a bottle of wine, and speaking with biting sarcasm, You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here again. Brother, I haven't forgiven you for what happened the other day yet. He squinted at Aster, questioning him with contempt, and yet you barge in here and talk about making a deal? What the hell do you think you are? Standing amidst the circle of sharp blades, Aster maintained a terrifying calmness. He looked straight at his enemy and clearly declared his purpose. I'm here to bring my sister and my teammates back. To accomplish that, Aster made an offer that left everyone stunned. He pointed down at the iron mask lying on the floor and declared coldly, In return, I will let you put the iron shackles on me. That is my condition. Witnessing his brother's insane decision, Alphen gasped in her mind, Aster, what on earth are you thinking? Aster continued to dig deep into his opponent's calculations. You must have heard the rumors that I'm suspected of intending to revolt, right? He asserted that this was Julius's chance to chain up a rebel, not a bad deal for him. Lillian heard this and laughed mockingly. Are you crazy? You're actually asking to be someone's pet? Are you a masochist or something? Julius pondered, admitting Aster was indeed a thorn in the Elmheim family's side. However, looking into those determined eyes, Julius couldn't help but feel suspicious. He hissed the question, "But I don't think you're the type to just submit and obey. What the hell are you plotting?" The response was only Aster's mysterious silence amidst the blades pressed against his neck. Julius was still full of suspicion but just replied coldly, "Nothing at all." He looked toward the iron mask lying on the ground and affirmed, "That mask is locked with magic and only you have the key. You can kill me whenever you want." Even so, Aster's eyes suddenly became sharp. He continued provocatively, "You're really lacking in confidence, cousin." The remark touched his ego, driving Julius mad. He radiated a wave of fiery magic surrounding his body and gritted his teeth, thinking to himself, "This brat." Finally, he declared decisively, "Fine, I'll accept that bet." Julius slammed the bottle of wine down on the table, reasoning that because Aster himself had proposed it, simply swapping positions was too boring. Looking toward those being shackled, he issued a brutal challenge, not 3 days, but 10 days. 10 days wearing that without a single drop of water or a bite of food. If you're still breathing by then, I'll set them all free. Witnessing his brother's reckless decision, Alphen could only scream in helplessness behind the iron mask, "Stop it! Aster, that's impossible. You're just killing yourself." Amidst the circle of sharp blades, he knelt down and asserted coldly, "Then we have a deal." Aster understood better than anyone that the iron shackles would gnaw at and rot the human soul, because he himself had been raised as a tool of the Elmheim house for a long time. Looking at his sister Alphen falling behind in her mask, he painfully remembered the strong and stubborn Alphen of his memories. Although she was as fragile as anyone else, she had always been a resilient sister who never showed weakness to the outside. And yet, now she stood there, unable to even resist these people, looking at him with eyes full of frailty behind the cold metal layer. Aster silently promised her, "Don't worry, sister, I will definitely break these shackles. When that time comes, we can talk at our leisure." Lillian wore a sinister smile when the iron mask was officially locked onto Aster's face, causing a purple magical aura to cover him. Suddenly, a commanding shout rang out from afar, "What the hell are you doing there?" On the training ground, the students wearing iron masks were lying writhing on the ground from exhaustion. The supervisor roared with cruelty, "Who gave you permission to rest?" Heavy gasps for air rang out in frustration. "Damn it, why do I have to go through this?" They had realized that the demonic instructor didn't care even when they were having to carry these torturous shackles. Under the harsh sun of the training ground, Smith gasped with worry, "At this rate, we'll die before Aster can save us." Standing next to him, Nolan looked coldly at Gurion, who was kneeling, and mocked, "For some of us, I call it karma." Smith could only sigh, encouraging others to try to endure, while secretly being amazed that several days had passed and Aster was still acting as if nothing had happened. Watching Aster's silhouette still diligently running on the field, Nolan wondered if the seven-winged stamina was truly at a monstrous level. A normal person could only survive 3 or 4 days without food or water, and at most, only a week if they lay still like a cocoon to conserve energy. Yet Aster wasn't just starving himself, he was filling the past few days with frantic training intensity, continuously swinging his sword in fiery clashes with his opponents. Even when having to carry heavy logs on his shoulders to cross the rushing current, Aster didn't show any signs of exhaustion. Nolan thought to himself, "This guy is a monster, not a human anymore." A strange rumor began to spread among the students about his past, that before being adopted by the Viscount, that seven-winged child had crawled for miles alone through the snowy night since he was a newborn baby. That baby had single-handedly crossed an entire mountain range buried deep in snow during a stormy night. Smith couldn't help but shudder. If that's true, isn't his vitality too extraordinary? Even so, deep down, he still doubted it was just a cheap intimidation tactic to show off. Amidst the mist and suffocating pressure, Aster was still looming, walking with blazing eyes and a crimson magical aura surrounding his body. "Dinner time, you rats." Lillian walked arrogantly through the dark hallway, followed by soldiers carrying silver-plated food trays. With a snap of her fingers crackling with sinister purple magic, she signaled for dinner to begin, her gaze dripping with contempt for those shackled in iron. With a snap of her fingers crackling with sinister purple magic, she signaled for dinner to begin, her gaze dripping with contempt for those shackled in iron. Looking at the miserable rations, Gurion completely broke down. He stammered in utter despair, "Again? This is all we get? I can't take it anymore. If this keeps up, I'm going to die." Another man trembled as he knelt at her feet, pleading, "Please, ma'am, give us some real food." But the only response to that pathetic plea was Lillian's cruel stomp, crushing a piece of cheese right into the filthy floor. She sneered viciously, "Oh my, if you didn't want to eat, you should have just said so from the start." Lillian nonchalantly remarked that it was a waste to treat food like that. She glanced toward the dark corner of the room and mocked, "Unlike you lot, there's a kid out there suffering far worse than this." She glanced toward the dark corner of the room and mocked, "Unlike you lot, there's a kid out there suffering far worse than this. Looking at that sight, your little brother is quite the saint, isn't he?" Julius casually enjoyed his steak. He glanced at Alphen, who was sitting listlessly, and taunted, "Why don't you go over and cheer him on, Alphen?" He laughed at her helplessness. "Ah, but I guess you don't have the face to look at him anymore. After all, he ended up in this wretched situation entirely because of you." Alphen could only grit her teeth in profound torment, silently calling out her brother's name. Seeing the tray of food set before her, Alphen felt a bitter lump in her throat. While Aster was enduring starvation in chains to buy freedom for everyone else, she was sitting here under the protection of the enemy. Alphen trembled as she questioned herself in desperation. "What am I supposed to do now?" Julius chewed his meat while squinting at Aster, who was slumped motionless in the distance, a seed of doubt growing in his heart. "But what the hell is actually going on? I was certain he'd have some scheme or trick to get out of this. Yet, all this time, he hadn't shown even the slightest sign of resistance." Watching the lonely silhouette of his cousin, Julius wondered if Aster truly intended to use his mortal body to endure the entire 10 days. He wore a twisted, excited smile, determined to savor every second of the torture to see how long the pride of the 7 Wings could hold out against the cruelty of starvation. But just as Julius was at his most triumphant, behind the cold iron mask, Aster's eyes suddenly flared with a mysterious glint. "You'll see." Then, the scene shifted back to the classroom, where the teacher was continuing to lecture the students on the principles of mana control. Standing proudly in front of the class, he said, "If you infuse your mana into a sword, the blade will become infinitely sharper, transforming into a deadly edge. And if you pump mana into your own body, it forms an armor capable of protecting you from any attack." The teacher slowly scanned the room, then continued his explanation in a calm yet stern tone. "If you analyze it carefully, mana is incredibly versatile and can change its function according to the user's will. It can become anything, provided you know how to control it skillfully." He offered more examples. Mana can turn into legs that help you run faster than a horse, or eyes that detect enemies from far away. The possibilities are infinite for those who truly understand how to use it. While the students listened intently, Aster sat silently in his seat, looking perfectly calm. However, as soon as he sensed movement nearby, his sharp instincts flared. He thought coldly to himself, "Idiots. Your positions have been completely exposed." Using the very knowledge the teacher had just explained, Aster immediately spotted 2 students secretly preparing to attack him from behind. Using the very knowledge the teacher had just explained, Aster immediately spotted 2 students secretly preparing to attack him from behind. While the storm swirled around his body, Aster calmly made his declaration, like a trump card ready to turn the tide. The size and intensity of the vortex immediately terrified the 2 students. Their faces paled as the violent winds howled, making it nearly impossible for them to approach him. Before they could react, Aster suddenly lunged forward with astonishing speed. To the 2 of them, he seemed to have vanished completely. They frantically searched for him, but a moment later, Aster appeared high up in the air. Then, with terrifying force, he dove straight down like a meteor crashing from the sky. The moment he hit the ground, a massive shockwave of energy exploded across the area, destroying everything around them. The sheer power of the impact left the 2 students completely disoriented. Their condition became immediately pathetic after the horrific attack. Right after that, the scene switched back to the teacher. He continued his lecture without interruption. With a serious tone, he announced during the Level 4 training session, "I will teach you more advanced types of magic." The teacher continued his lecture in a cold, disciplined voice that made the atmosphere in the training grounds even more stifling. "In this training session, the use of swords is strictly prohibited," he declared firmly while looking at each student present. "For us, those who bear the wing emblem, learning how to kill without using a sword is a basic skill. That is what I want all of you to learn in this class." His words carried great weight, showing that this training was not standard combat practice. This was no longer about sword fighting, but about turning one's own body, mana, and control into lethal weapons that could decide life and death. The scene shifted to Aster. His energy could be seen fading, fatigue gnawing at his body bit by bit. Even maintaining his balance had become difficult. Nevertheless, he silently endured the brutal training. While struggling to remain conscious, Aster whispered in his head, "It's already the 7th day at Iron Lead. It's been several days since the level 4 training started." He slowly slumped to the ground, his heavy breathing becoming more audible. Even in that state, his thoughts remained sharp. "I've gotten quite used to practicing mana control in real combat mode. Only 3 days left until the deadline. If I can hold on until then, my sister and my comrades will be free." However, even as he thought of that hope, his frustration continued to grow. After a moment of silence, Aster clenched his fist and continued to tell himself, "But staying passive like this is useless. Julius possesses overwhelming power even without a sword. Yet, he still hasn't revealed his true potential." The pressure of reality weighed heavily on his mind. "My opponent is a first-rate student. Now is not the time for me to be stuck in a place like this." His thoughts grew more desperate as he tried to push himself past his physical limits. "Even while I'm this exhausted, if I can just grasp something to help me get closer to his level." By now, the extent of his exhaustion was clear. Aster was so weak that he had to lean against a nearby tree to stay upright. His whole body trembled with fatigue, even opening his eyes had become a struggle. A moment later, the world before him began to blur. His distorted vision worsened to the point where he could barely see anything at all. Then, with no strength left to hold on, he suddenly lost consciousness. His body collapsed forward, hitting the ground hard. In the final moment before passing out completely, Aster weakly muttered, "It's over." The world is spinning. The world around him faded further as his strength finally gave out. He collapsed completely onto the ground. A moment later, someone suddenly approached, looking down at Aster's drained state. The person said coldly, "So this is where your limit lies. You have a fever. Well, that's understandable. After all, you're only human." It was Nolan. With a look of annoyance, he continued, "The Count will probably be annoyed if you die. You told me to assist if anything happened, after all." Having said that, Nolan sighed in frustration. What a tedious task. Hearing those words in his semi-conscious state, Aster felt suspicious. Nolan? Why is he? But before he could think clearly, Nolan said nonchalantly, "Stay here for a bit. I'll go get a sword to break these iron shackles for you." But the moment Nolan turned to leave, Aster suddenly reached out a trembling hand, grabbing his leg to hold him back. Nolan frowned, looking down with irritation and disbelief. "What are you doing? Keep this up and you'll die, you idiot." Even in his weakened state, Aster's will did not waver. In his heart, he screamed, "If I give up here, who will save my sister?" Even though he could barely move, he was determined not to let Nolan interfere, not wanting him to do anything unnecessary that could ruin everything. Nolan looked at him for a few seconds, then lowered his voice. "I don't fully understand what you're trying to say, but I know you're very unhappy." His expression became a bit more serious. "No matter how much you try to hold on to your promises to those people, it doesn't mean they're doing the same for you." The words carried a harsh truth that struck hard at Aster's resolve. Immediately after, Nolan glanced around. By now, quite a few other students had gathered there. They stood silently, watching Aster's pathetic state. Among them, one person spoke up mockingly, "Wow, you look terrible, Aster." At this moment, Lillian finally appeared, looking at Aster with a mocking smile. "If you wander around looking like that, people might mistake you for a zombie." Her voice immediately made Aster feel even more uncomfortable. While trying to stand firm, he thought angrily, "Why is it her?" Before he could speak, Nolan stepped forward and asked coldly, "And what are you doing here, gathering this bunch of fame seekers?" "They're in the middle of level 4 training right now. Don't tell me a second-year student is specifically here to observe?" At that moment, it was clear that the eyes of all the gathered students were glowing with a strange red light, making the atmosphere even more dangerous. Lillian calmly replied to Nolan while maintaining her arrogant look, "These guys said they wanted to show off in front of me, so I came to do them a favor and watch. Consider it my little classroom visit." She shrugged and added, "Even the teacher said it was fine." But her smile quickly turned ominous as she looked slowly down at Aster. Her voice turned cruel. "But the thing I want to see most is you crying and begging me for forgiveness?" Hearing those words, the fire of rage in Aster burned even brighter. Lillian gracefully jumped onto a nearby tree branch, sitting comfortably as if watching a play, crossing her legs as she looked down at everyone and declared coldly, "Kill each other as you like. Don't worry about me." As soon as she finished speaking, all the students lunged simultaneously toward Aster and Nolan. Seeing the flood of attacks coming from all directions, Aster immediately realized, "They intend to defeat me before the 10 days are up." To be honest, I expected some interference, but to be this reckless. His thoughts briefly shifted to Nolan. They even dragged Nolan into this. Before he could think further, one of them lunged straight at him. The attacks coming from every side forced Aster to frantically block and dodge, while his exhausted body could barely hold on. On the other side, Nolan fought back while roaring in anger. What kind of stupid rule is this, banning knights from drawing their swords? Meanwhile, Aster felt the overwhelming difference in numbers. His tired body had reached its limit. If I don't fight for real, I'll collapse first. He tried to change the situation, once again attempting to release his energy. But his weakened state made it hard to maintain full control. In his heart, he screamed, I need a cheap trump card. Something that can break this deadlock. If I fail here, everything is lost. Up above, Lillian was still amused, watching the entire fight. Seeing Aster struggle, she mocked, without a sword, you're nothing. Now you only know how to use your fists and fight dirty. She narrowed her eyes, and for someone like you, that's the hardest thing, isn't it? She laughed softly and then added coldly, you're still as arrogant and stubborn as ever. But actually, it's that very inability to let go that makes you so pathetic. As the battle continued, Aster's condition worsened. His breathing was heavy, and his body had reached its absolute limit. Suddenly, Nolan noticed someone moving rapidly toward Aster's back. Realizing the danger, he shouted a loud warning. But before Aster could react, another one appeared behind him and delivered an extremely fast blow. The attack was too fast for Aster to defend against. The next moment, the horrific force slammed him hard into a nearby tree. A dull impact sounded, and blood sprayed from Aster's mouth as his body collapsed to the base of the tree. His condition was now clearly pathetic. Watching the horrific scene, Nolan's face changed completely in shock. Meanwhile, Lillian, up above, spoke calmly, stop. Don't kill him yet. Understood? A twisted smile appeared on her face. After all, I still intend to train him myself. Then, with a tone of cruel delight, she added, let him suffer a bit more. Just make sure he doesn't die. At this moment, an attacker grabbed Aster's hair, forcing his head up. Aster's weak body barely responded. But at that very moment, something suddenly changed. Aster's eyes suddenly flashed with a brilliant golden light. A terrifying burst of energy exploded from his body, causing the entire surrounding space to tremble violently. The overwhelming pressure instantly shocked everyone. Lillian just smiled, watching with interest. A moment later, countless sharp energy blades appeared around Aster's body, hovering in the air as the wild mana swirled in circles. The blades immediately lunged at the surrounding enemies with lethal force, tearing through the battlefield. Aster slowly raised his head, his golden eyes filled with pure rage. The aftermath of those attacks left one student with their entire arm severely injured. The injured student looked at him in terror, stammering, is this happening just because I touched him? The moment I touched him, it felt like all his mana was running through my arm. A moment later, Aster slowly stood up. The powerful energy surrounding him did not diminish. Instead, it was still pouring out of his body like an invisible storm. Seeing this, a student narrowed his eyes and said, is that some kind of mana defense? It's weak, but if that's all you've got, I can still crush you again. The student lunged forward with astonishing speed, intending to overwhelm Aster once more. Watching him lunge, Aster calmly released more energy. Then, he held one hand out in front. The moment the attacker approached, Aster blocked him with a single hand. At the same time, the strange energy surrounding Aster exploded. Countless deep cuts and gashes suddenly appeared all over the student's body, as if invisible blades were slashing from every direction. Blood sprayed everywhere as new wounds continuously appeared on his arms, chest, and shoulders. Unable to withstand the assault, the student collapsed to the ground almost immediately. Everyone present witnessed the entire scene. After seeing what had just happened, Lillian felt a chill run down her spine. For the first time, real fear began to creep into her heart. Looking at Aster with disbelief, she thought to herself, no way. Even though he's considered useless, he's already able to use a tribute transformation? Just then, several more students lunged simultaneously, preparing to attack Aster from all sides. Meanwhile, Aster remained in absolute focus, standing in the center of the energy vortex pouring out of his body. His mind quickly analyzed what was happening. Deep down, he realized that this power was completely different from the techniques he had learned. It was far beyond basic concepts like weapon enhancement or body reinforcement. As the students continued to lunge at him, Aster's thoughts became clearer. The phenomenon he had just awakened was not a simple enhancement technique. The power flowing through him operated on a completely different principle, surpassing the foundation of ordinary mana control. The energy surrounding his body seemed to possess its own unique characteristics, reacting to everything that touched it. Each passing second, Aster felt he was getting closer to understanding that mysterious power. And as the next wave of attacks came, one thing became increasingly clear: they were no longer facing the useless teenager they used to mock. Something inside Aster had awakened, and the terrifying results were gradually becoming apparent on the battlefield. After launching a powerful slash, Aster finally began to understand the nature of the ability he had just awakened. As energy flowed around him, he thought to himself, "This is a variation of mana control, adding a unique attribute." He now understood why techniques like this were considered so extraordinary. This was an advanced form of mana control that very few could achieve. Standing to the side, Nolan witnessed the whole thing. His eyes remained fixed on Aster while countless thoughts raced through his mind. After seeing Aster's astonishing progress, Nolan wondered to himself, "Have you always been one step ahead of me?" 7 wings. Lillian hopped down from the tree branch, looking at the battlefield with a cold smile. "Not bad. Honestly, I didn't expect you to go this far, but no matter how impressive it looks, you still haven't killed anyone. Do you really think that's going to stop my soldiers?" Having said that, she placed a foot on the body of someone lying motionless. She slowly drew her sword and looked down with absolute contempt. "Now, get up, you filthy piece of trash." Without hesitation, she swung her sword at the man in front of her. Meanwhile, Aster and Nolan stood nearby, silently observing everything. Just then, something unexpected happened. Cracks suddenly spread across the masks worn by the controlled students. One by one, they shattered into pieces and fell to the ground. The fragments scattered everywhere. When the students finally revealed their true faces, Lillian's eyes widened in shock. This was something she had completely failed to anticipate. The students looked around in confusion, and then a clear sense of relief appeared on their faces. "The mask is off. Thank goodness, I can finally breathe." Witnessing that scene, Nolan turned to look at Aster. A flash of surprise crossed his face as he thought, "Right in the middle of battle, you managed to do that much." The result of Aster's efforts was now clear. However, Lillian immediately tried to regain control of the situation. "What is this?" Her voice became sharp as she stared at the freed students. "You lot, eat your fill and then put the masks back on for me. You know your place." She glanced at them with an arrogant look. "I don't know what you think you're helping them with, but it's useless." But this time, her words had no effect. Not a single student moved. No one reached up to put their masks back on. No one followed her orders. The prolonged silence only made her more uneasy. Hesitation appeared on her face, and panic began to creep into her mind. "Hey! What are you doing?" she yelled. "I said put them back on right now." Even though she screamed until she was hoarse, no one listened. The students just stood where they were, no longer under her control. For the first time, real fear and confusion were evident on Lillian's face. The authority she had believed was absolute was collapsing right before her eyes. Standing not far away, Nolan watched calmly. Then, with a faint smile, he spoke up. "It seems even after taking off the iron shackles, he's still going to keep biting." His eyes remained fixed on Aster. His nature turns out not to be completely rotten after all. Nolan looked at Lillian with a composed gaze before continuing. "What are you going to do now? Are you going to be the next opponent?" Lillian slowly drew her sword. However, before she could say anything, Nolan continued to look straight at her. "What's wrong? Why don't you say something?" His voice remained calm. "Let me tell you something. With that power, you could completely break your own mask. It's not that hard, is it?" A moment of silence blanketed the battlefield. "Will you keep persisting until the day of the vow?" His expression became more serious. "Are you still the person who wants to destroy Elmheim?" As those words reached her ears, Lillian began to turn away. She didn't answer immediately. Her footsteps echoed on the battlefield before she stopped abruptly. A twisted smile spread across her face. "You're quite polite." She turned her head slightly to look at him. "But if you keep going like this, sooner or later you'll lose." "You'll lose, I'm sure of it." Meanwhile, Aster listened to it all silently. His mind was far from at peace. "I can't do that right now." He clenched his fists. I am, after all, from the house of Count Vic. I cannot do things that father and everyone else wouldn't be proud of. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his head. The intense headache made him stumble. Nolan immediately realized something was wrong. His eyes widened, and he quickly moved toward Aster. But before he could reach him, someone else arrived first. Alphen rushed over and caught Aster just before he fell. As she held him, countless emotions surged in her heart. You really are a madman. Her voice trembled. You're always so reckless. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she bowed her head. Even though I'm your sister, it's always you helping me. Memories flooded back. The times Aster had been by her side, giving her strength, standing with her no matter what. But then, a gentle smile appeared on her lips. You've given me enough courage already. She tightened her embrace. I'm okay now. Those were the last words Aster heard before his consciousness drifted into darkness. When Aster opened his eyes again, he found himself lying on a bed. Outside the window was darkness, proving it was already night. For a few seconds, he could only stare blankly at the ceiling. Where am I? He slowly sat up, looking around the room. His eyes immediately searched for one person, Alphen. For a moment, he thought he felt his sister beside him, but there was no one. The room was completely empty. Aster frowned. Was it just an illusion? The memories before he passed out seemed strangely distant. Just then, something on the nearby table caught his eye. A letter. His expression shifted instantly. A sense of unease crept into his heart. He hurriedly reached for the envelope. Sister. As soon as he realized who it was from, his heart raced. Aster opened the letter immediately, anxiety etched on his face. No. His hand trembled slightly. Please, don't tell me. Aster lunged forward at extreme speed, his face panic-stricken, shouting, Sister, I know. Don't say anything. Just then, Maze blocked him and asked, Where are you rushing off to? You're not ready to head out yet. Just then, Maze blocked him and asked, Where are you rushing off to? You're not ready to head out yet. The moment he recognized his sister's handwriting, his heart sank. He hurriedly picked it up and devoured the words. Aster, thank you and I'm so sorry. I've tried my best to help a cowardly sister like myself, but now it's my turn to protect you, just like you protected me at the dance. This time, I will protect you. Upon finishing the letter, Aster didn't hesitate to dash forward. His mind was in complete chaos as he ran. Damn it! Don't do this, sister. Don't be foolish enough to dive into this. I didn't wear those iron shackles for you to do something so reckless. If anything happens to you, his thoughts raced faster than his feet. Fear and remorse tightened around his heart with every second. Finally, he arrived. Without hesitation, he kicked the door open and roared, Why did it have to go this far? His words cut off abruptly. Right before his eyes, Alphen lay collapsed on the ground. His eyes widened in horror. Sister! Meanwhile, Lillian let out a long, lazy yawn, as if the entire situation bored her. Glancing toward Aster, she said nonchalantly, Oh, your turn now, is it? She stretched slightly and continued, Right before bedtime, too. Both you siblings really don't know how to behave, do you? Ignoring her mocking tone, Aster rushed to Alphen's side and frantically gripped her shoulders. Sister! Wake up, sister. Lillian watched the scene with amusement, then sneered, She came here to beg me to release Aster. She kept saying that if this continued, you would die. Her eyes narrowed as she recalled the meeting. Even now, she's still terrified of us. Alphen is such a timid girl, she wouldn't even dare utter a complaint. No matter how unfairly she was treated, she would just endure it in silence. A flash of surprise crossed Lillian's face, and yet, suddenly, she went and caused trouble herself. She stood before me with a look of pure determination. There was no trace left of the scared girl she used to be. For the first time, Alphen looked me straight in the eye without fear, ready to bet everything on you. Hearing this, Aster clenched his fists tighter. The image of his timid sister charging into the tiger's den alone played over and over in his mind. I was so naive from the start. I shouldn't have compromised, I should have used brute force to save her. If I had done that, my sister wouldn't have had to do something so reckless. As those thoughts echoed within him, memories from the past suddenly came rushing back. The scene shifted to a lesson from long ago. Count Hyried stood before the two children, speaking with a stern expression. Listen closely, both of you. A true knight must know how to endure injustice. To protect what needs protecting, one needs great power, status, and position. If you think carefully about what you need to protect, sometimes not fighting is the best choice. That is the very meaning of being a knight. Young Aster listened intently, and his father continued, even if someone spits in your face, even if they tear your body apart with their swords, you must not let your emotions dictate and cause you to counterattack blindly. Those words were etched into his mind. Looking up at his father, the young Aster couldn't help but ask, so, father, are you saying we should let them hit us and do nothing? The count shook his head immediately. That is not what I am saying. His sharp eyes looked straight at his son. It means you must not misjudge the purpose and the timing. He was silent for a moment, then continued, his voice deeper, carrying experience and conviction. What do you hold your sword for? What do you fight for? You must always have the answer to that. Looking at his sister, who had risked everything for him, the answer became clearer than ever. The memory of Count Hyried's teachings continued to echo. If the time comes when you truly must fight, draw your sword without hesitation. Those words rang out clearer now than ever before. The atmosphere suddenly shifted. Lillian felt a strange and unsettling sensation spread through her body. For the first time, her confidence began to waver. What is happening? But before anyone could react, a sword suddenly flew through the air with terrifying speed, stopping right next to Aster as if answering his summons. The moment the sword reached his hand, a surge of terrifying power erupted from his body. A frightening wave of energy rippled out, causing the entire space to tremble. The pressure was so strong that even Lillian found it hard to endure. Energy pounded at her from all directions, making her nearly lose her balance. For the first time, real fear was evident on her face. Meanwhile, Julius sat nearby, observing it all. Even he could feel the overwhelming power radiating from Aster, and his expression darkened. Aster's eyes were filled with pure rage. He repeated the same sentence over and over, take them off. His voice sounded less human with every word. Finally, his killing intent erupted completely. I will not leave even a single drop of Elmheim blood behind. The moment the words left his lips, the energy around him became even more violent. His aura twisted intensely as his fury reached an unimaginable level. I will kill them all. Nearby, Alphen slowly regained consciousness. Her eyes fluttered open, and the first thing she saw was Aster standing in the middle of a terrifying storm of energy. Realizing the situation, fear was evident on her face. No. Stop. Her voice trembled weakly. It's just like that time again. At the same moment, Julius's mother looked at Aster with sheer amazement. This mana. It's impossible. Dean Mays witnessed the scene and immediately understood, loss of control. The scene returned to Aster. His entire body was overflowing with terrifying energy. The amount of energy being released was so massive that everything around him seemed about to be swallowed whole. He slowly placed his sister's body on the ground. Then, he gripped the sword tightly. Without saying another word, he lunged straight at Lillian with terrifying speed. The moment he moved, Lillian's composure shattered completely. Fear washed over her face when she saw the murderous rage in Aster's eyes. He was no longer holding back. He was no longer hesitating. He looked like a monster determined to destroy everything in his path. Just as Aster's sword was about to reach Lillian, Julius suddenly stepped between them. Clang! The weapons clashed violently. A shockwave rippled through the area. Despite having to resist the overwhelming power, Julius still smiled. Lillian immediately cried out in relief, Julius! Julius looked straight into Aster's eyes. Is this the power of the Seven Wings? His expression revealed understanding. I see. I understand why those old geezers value you so much. His smile widened. I didn't expect that even on the brink of death, you could still unleash this kind of power. Afterward, his expression turned sharper. But do you think this is okay? Saving your comrade, isn't that what you've been enduring until now? Having said that, Julius immediately lunged forward. He charged straight at Aster. However, Aster had no reaction. His eyes were still filled with endless rage, his mouth constantly repeating those words. The hatred inside him was consuming everything. Julius laughed out loud. Did you forget how to talk? He gripped his weapon tightly. But honestly, I've been thinking it's time to crush you. His smile turned colder. Let's end this with a rematch. The next moment, both simultaneously unleashed their full force. Boom! Afterward, the collision between the two energy streams became the center of the battlefield. Both warriors unleashed their full power without restraint. The terrifying pressure radiating from them caused everyone around to panic in utter terror. The onlookers immediately realized that staying nearby was extremely dangerous. One by one, they began to scream and shout, "We're going to get caught in this! Run!" The violent waves of mana energy continued to spread across the battlefield. The air grew increasingly chaotic. The ground shook violently under the pressure from the direct clash between the two terrifying forces. Witnessing this unbelievable display, Lillian was completely stunned. Looking at Aster with disbelief, she stammered, "What is with this guy? Why can he go toe-to-toe with his brother in this state?" She simply couldn't understand how someone who looked as pathetic and exhausted as Aster could still continue to duel with an opponent that powerful. Meanwhile, Julius silently watched the battle. The more he looked, the more amazed he became. Deep inside, he thought to himself, "So much mana. He never used it when we fought. Is this the real battle between two people bearing the wing emblem?" For the first time, he truly realized the horrific gap between a casual match and a battle where two elites bearing the wing emblem were both giving it their all. Each clash released massive explosions of energy, tearing everything apart like a storm. The pressure from the confrontation became so terrifying that even Alphen couldn't withstand it. A powerful shockwave exploded from the battlefield, throwing her from her position and making her fall hard to the ground, even though she wasn't directly involved in the fight. Meanwhile, Julius continued his relentless attacks on Aster. As he struck, countless thoughts raced through his head. He couldn't understand what was unfolding before his eyes. Looking at Aster, he thought, "This guy, just a moment ago he was going crazy for Alphen, and now he won't even look at his sister. What on earth is driving him now?" The more he looked, the more annoyed and frustrated Julius felt. Aster's actions made absolutely no logical sense to him. The person standing before him seemed to have been completely swallowed by something far beyond reason. The sight of Aster still continuing to fight with such terrifying determination only stirred up more anger in Julius. However, at this moment, Aster had only one thought in his head. Everything else had vanished from his consciousness. The battlefield, the people around him, even his own condition no longer mattered. There was only one burning desire repeating constantly in his head like an unbreakable command. Destroy the Elmheim bloodline. That thought consumed his entire being. His eyes were filled with pure hatred. He suddenly roared in anger and reached toward Julius. Seeing that familiar movement, Julius immediately realized what Aster was planning. His face stiffened, and he roared, "Are you trying to steal my mana with that trick again?" Julius suddenly lunged with astonishing speed, not giving Aster a single moment to carry out his plan. He charged straight at him and yelled, "I will never give you that chance." His voice was full of confidence as he closed the distance in the blink of an eye. Observing from the side, Lillian immediately sensed danger and tried to warn him. Looking at her brother with concern, she screamed, "Brother, look out! His mana!" But before she could finish, the battlefield was once again swallowed by the terrifying power of Aster's energy. On the other side, Aster didn't stop releasing his power. His energy tore through everything around him, destroying all that lay in its path. The nature of that power was terrifying. It didn't simply radiate like normal mana. It felt like a force born only to cut, tear, and obliterate everything it touched. Waves of cutting energy swept across the battlefield, countless invisible attacks flying toward Julius from every direction. Even Julius, who had remained calm and confident until now, was momentarily startled. When he felt something strange happening to his body, his eyes widened in surprise. Looking down, he saw countless small cuts appearing on his skin. Blood began to flow from the wounds as the cutting force grew stronger. Looking at those wounds, he muttered in horror, "The cutting force is climbing all over my body." Although the cuts weren't fatal, their presence was alarming enough. The cutting energy was spreading into his very mana, making the situation much more dangerous than a standard attack. In that moment, Julius realized he was near real danger. Refusing to be overwhelmed, he suddenly roared loudly and released a massive amount of mana. A terrifying explosion of heat erupted from his body. The pressure was so strong that his clothes began to shred under the surging power. Fire and searing temperatures surrounded him. He glared at Aster and roared, "You can cut other people's mana? Just having slashing attribute mana is rare, but you're playing such a dangerous trick. This is the first time I've almost been killed by mana. But my mana isn't just hot. You know, my mana is hot enough to kill people. When Julius unleashed his full power, everyone around clearly felt the horrific heat radiating from his body. The temperature soared in the blink of an eye. The air seemed to warp. Under the intense heat spreading out, just standing near him was enough to burn someone alive. The battlefield became a confrontation between destructive cutting energy and overwhelming heat, turning the entire area into a wasteland of destruction. At this moment, Aster seemed a bit more conscious than before. The uncontrollable, crazed look in his eyes softened for a moment as he looked straight at Julius. Realizing that, Julius sneered with contempt, looking down at him arrogantly. Just standing here is enough to make everyone lose the will to oppose me. That's your fault for daring to go against me. Power is the very thing that makes them think like that. The words carried the arrogance of someone who had stood above others his entire life, believing that absolute power naturally demanded submission. Hearing those words, Aster's anger flared even more. His face hardened, and he glared at Julius with hatred. He screamed at the top of his lungs, "That's because you're the one still standing until the end." The moment the words ended, he began gathering power for another attack. The energy around him grew increasingly stronger, preparing for another horrific collision between the two warriors. Seeing this, Julius just smiled. Instead of feeling threatened, he seemed amused. Looking straight at Aster, he said, "It seems you can still speak rather than just barking. But you know, what you're doing is just a futile struggle." Aster and Julius continued to clash head-on, their energies colliding repeatedly with terrifying force. Each clash released violent shockwaves, tearing up the battlefield, causing the surrounding area to shake under the horrific pressure. The intensity of the battle had reached a level where just watching it felt dangerous. On the sidelines, Lillian watched the scene with fearful eyes. Seeing Aster pushing himself past his limits, even hurting his own body, she couldn't hide her disgust and unease. Her voice trembling, she said, "Fighting and still harming yourself. How disgusting." Meanwhile, Alphen slowly opened her eyes. As her vision cleared and she looked toward the battlefield, memories from the past suddenly rushed back. Seeing Aster in his current state, she remembered an event that had happened many years ago. Her face became emotional as she silently recalled, 7 years ago, Aster fell into that state just once. Back then, father risked his life to stop him. But ever since then, Aster started keeping his distance from his sisters. Her voice became quiet as she reflected on the truth. Father said the reason was the 7 wings going out of control, but deep inside, I've always believed there was another reason. I think, he still hasn't been able to forgive himself, because back then he was still immature. As Alphen's memories connected the past to the present, the scene returned to the battle. Watching her brother continue to fight alone with the entire burden of remorse, she couldn't help but speak from the bottom of her heart. "Why do you always try to take all the blame on yourself like that?" Her words were full of sadness, because she understood that even after all these years, Aster had never truly let go of that burden. Just then, the battle took a dramatic turn. Aster unleashed a powerful attack, striking Julius and sending him flying backward. The power of the blow was so great that even Alphen was astonished. For a moment, she almost couldn't believe her eyes. Julius, who seemed invincible, was pushed back. Realizing that, she was speechless. Even though he had been knocked back, Julius spoke up. Looking at Aster with an expression of both annoyance and reluctant admiration, he said, "I almost wanted to praise you. Your stubbornness. But just die already. Looking at a troublesome guy like you makes me angry." Despite the hostile words, it was undeniable that he had begun to acknowledge Aster's determination. However, the battle had also left Julius severely injured. Suddenly, his sword slipped from his hand and fell to the ground. He looked down in surprise. Both his arms were full of cuts. The accumulated injuries had finally caught up with him. Trying to move his arm, he realized something was wrong. Looking at his arm in disbelief, he muttered, "I can't put any strength into my arm anymore." Aster wasn't doing much better. His body had also suffered horrific damage in the battle, clearly forcing himself past his limits. Even so, he continued to advance, one step at a time. Surrounded by overwhelming energy, he moved toward Julius. No hesitation, no stopping. He simply kept moving forward. Julius watched him approach and for the first time felt real terror. The sight before him made him uneasy. Aster looked like he had completely thrown away any concern for his own condition. Clearly, something was wrong. Even after suffering such severe damage, he still advanced with a terrifying purpose. As Aster closed the distance, his intention became even clearer. His eyes remained fixed on Julius, his hands slowly reaching out in front of him. Afterward, Aster lunged at Julius with terrifying speed, carrying the intention to crush him completely. Just then, Alphen quickly ran up from behind and hugged him tightly, desperately screaming, "Aster! Stop! Don't use that fighting style that only gets you hurt." Because she was holding him from behind, her own body was affected. Countless cuts appeared on her arms and clothes from the violent stream of energy surrounding Aster. Aster realized his sister's condition and immediately froze for a moment. Blood flowed from his mouth as he looked at her and said weakly, "Sister, you're going to die." At the same time, a storm of frantic thoughts raced through his head. What the hell am I? This isn't good. I can't control the mana. At this level, the terrifying stream of energy inside him was still raging out of control, threatening to swallow everything in sight. At that very moment, someone suddenly shouted his name from behind. It was Maze. He said loudly, "Hey, catch!" What he threw toward Aster was the sword that had been confiscated earlier. The weapon spun in the air and flew straight toward him. The moment Aster caught the sword, everything changed. The uncontrollable stream of energy in his body began to subside, and for the first time, he was able to properly regulate the massive amount of mana that was surging forth. Gradually, the horrific aura that had been constantly rising began to decline. The violent pressure vanished, and the surrounding air finally became peaceful. Seeing Aster had regained control, Alphen breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Thank goodness, you're okay." Aster looked at his sister and immediately replied, "You're the one. What kind of reckless thing are you doing?" However, deep inside, he realized the truth of what had just happened. If this sword hadn't absorbed his mana, things could have become extremely dangerous. From the front, Julius observed the scene and spoke up with his usual arrogance, "You're still as clueless as ever about reading the air." He looked at Maze. "Maze, don't tell me you've lost all your nerve too? Even if I can't use my arm, killing you is still easy." Even though he was injured, there wasn't a shred of fear in his eyes. On the contrary, he still glared at Aster with murderous intent. However, before anything else could happen, another figure appeared. It was Julius's mother. The moment she stepped forward, she declared coldly, "That is unnecessary." Her gaze locked onto Aster. After observing him for a moment, she said, "Just as I thought. That abnormal mana was caused by you, wasn't it, Aster Elmheim? Arrest him." The order was given without hesitation. Immediately, the soldiers around them moved. Before Aster or Alphen could react, the guard had surrounded and subdued both siblings. Julius looked at this unexpected development in surprise, then turned to his mother angrily. "Mother, what does this mean?" Ignoring her son's anger, she explained calmly, "I received reports that during the previous training session, he used his sword to cut more than a dozen unarmed students. This is a vile act that goes against the principles of a knight. The Academy naturally cannot overlook it." The accusation shocked everyone. Alphen immediately stepped forward despite being restrained and loudly objected, "Cut them? Aster never did that." Aster gritted his teeth, silently observing everything and thinking. She acted fast. He quickly realized this situation had been prepared in advance, and someone had staged everything in the shadows long before the confrontation escalated to this point. Meanwhile, Julius's mother continued to speak in a cold, authoritative tone, addressing everyone present, and after seeing this pathetic scene, it's clear he has lost all reason. The Seven Wings rampage with uncontrollable power has pointlessly put other students in danger. Even if he comes from a branch family, any action that damages the honor of the Elmheim family cannot be forgiven. Tomorrow we will open an investigation to decide how to handle this, but for now, at the very least, you should prepare to leave the academy. Her words fell heavily, showing that the decision had been made in advance. The accusations continued to pile up on Aster, and the situation grew more desperate. Witnessing it all, Alphen bowed her head slightly and thought, "It's finally come to this." Her heart was full of sadness, but at the same time, she wasn't too surprised. Deep down, she had feared that sooner or later, those targeting Aster would make their move. Not far away, Maze was also silently observing. Unlike Alphen, he carefully considered the political consequences of every action. He thought, "That's why I told him to be careful. But if I continue to protect him openly, my position will also be in danger. However, I can't afford to lose him here either." However, before anyone could react further, a horrific wave of heat suddenly exploded throughout the battlefield. The powerful energy blew the surrounding soldiers away. In the blink of an eye, the soldiers restraining Aster and Elfin were knocked back. No one could withstand that power. Everyone turned toward the source of the strength, only to see Julius standing there with an arrogant and defiant look. Before everyone, Julius loudly declared, "Provocations like that are the privilege of the winner, right? Don't just show up and steal the best part for yourself." The words immediately caught his mother's attention. She narrowed her eyes at her son. "What do you intend to do?" Without hesitation, Julius replied, "If you just expel him like this, people will think I ran home crying to my parents because I was defeated, right? That is the real insult to the Elmheim family." A confident smile spread across his face as he continued, "Therefore, I will kill him myself. Until then, you all stay back." The bold declaration surprised many. He was publicly rejecting his mother's way of handling things and insisting on resolving it himself. Hearing this, his mother's face stiffened. "It seems I've spoiled you too much." But Julius was completely unaffected. He looked straight at her and asked in return, "Then what about my brother?" The mention of Patrick immediately changed the atmosphere. His mother replied with a sarcastic tone, "Patrick is much more obedient." Julius just smirked. "Besides, my status as a direct heir is higher than even a duchess. If you understand, then stay back. Stay back, my dear mother." The arrogance in his words shocked many around him. Very few dared to speak to her this way, but Julius did it without any fear. He stood tall, clearly affirming he had no intention of backing down. In the silent moment, his mother stared at him. Then, realizing further argument was useless, she turned and left. As she left, she issued a final warning: "Do whatever you want. Next time, don't just talk, I expect you to prove it with actions." Julius looked at Aster for a moment, then said in a cold, resolute voice, "I will not acknowledge it. Neither the Seven Wings nor you." Aster was surprised to see Julius turn and leave after everything that had happened. This wasn't the reaction he expected. He quickly called after him, "What about our agreement?" Hearing the question, Julius paused for a moment before replying without bothering to turn back, "With a monster that breaks its own shackles, there are no more damn agreements. The iron shackles are just ornaments now. Even worse than shackles. From now on, do whatever you want. Even if a few small fish escape the cage, I can't be bothered to chase them." By now, everyone who had been captured had been freed. Julius walked away while speaking over his shoulder, "But don't even think about running away. Understood? We will definitely end this. Before that, go tame your 7 wings." With those final words, he left the area, closing the chaotic confrontation of the night. A night full of unbelievable events finally came to an end. And a few days passed in silence. Now, Aster was reunited with his entire team. The atmosphere was much more cheerful than before. Everyone looked genuinely happy to see him again. As soon as they surrounded him, questions rushed in from all sides. "Boss, are your wounds okay? I heard you caused a huge mess again." "Boss, everyone among us is just talking about that." The excitement of the group was clear, but Aster immediately shook his head and replied, "Everyone, stop calling me boss. This time I didn't do anything at all. I almost lost the chance to save my comrades right before my eyes." His voice revealed his frustration. Even though everyone considered him a hero, he could only focus on his own shortcomings and the moments he felt helpless. Just then, Vigor walked up and replied, "What are you talking about? Everyone captured by Iron Reed has returned safely like this, right? And that's all thanks to your big battle." Aster lowered his eyes and replied, "That was only because we were saved by the mercy of our Elmheim enemies." "Nothing more." Aster lowered his eyes and replied, "That was only because we were saved by the mercy of our Elmheim enemies." "Nothing more." Seeing him blaming himself too much, Vigor suddenly slapped his shoulder hard and laughed out loud. "Hey, don't torture yourself like that. You charged into enemy territory alone for your comrades. Everyone knows you risked your life to fight. And you're only 14 years old." The others nodded in agreement. He continued, "There isn't anyone among us who has lost respect for you because of this. Don't worry." The sincere words left Aster unsure of how to respond for a moment. But before he could say anything, Vigor leaned in closer with a mischievous smile. "More importantly, how's things with your beautiful sister? Finally, you two siblings had some time to be alone together, right?" As soon as the words ended, the scene cut abruptly before Aster could answer. The story shifted to another location, where Aster was resting alone in his room. The cheerful atmosphere from before disappeared, replaced by silence. Lying alone, he began to think about everything that had happened. Lying alone, he he began to think about everything that had happened. Perhaps that is the true nature of the friction between us. Whether there are iron shackles or not, it's the same. As he was immersed in his thoughts, a sudden knock on the door echoed. Knock knock. The unexpected sound brought him back to reality. He sat up and looked toward the door. Who is it? A moment later, a familiar voice rang out from outside. It was Elfin standing outside the door. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Can we talk?" "Just the two of us, like siblings." The words made Aster's heart skip a beat.